Hello and welcome back. It was only a short break, but we are back with another game for you here at the Global Poker League Summer Series live from Las Vegas. I'm Laura Cornelius. We just saw Jonathan Little defeat Mike Leah heads up. He took 6 points for the Las Vegas Moneymakers, and now we have another great match lined up for you this Sunday. It's Marc-Andre Ladouceur, the manager of the Montreal Nationals, and he will be facing Moscow Wolverine Igor Yaroshevsky.
And here we go. The second half of the doubleheader is on. Marc-Andre Ladouceur, Igor Yaroshevsky are here. But even more important, here in the booth, the great Jonathan Little, just fresh off the killing of Mike Leah in the cube. Jonathan, congrats on that victory.
Thank you. I didn't kill him. I only maimed him.
That's
he has
right.
to go play a World Series event today. He's going to hopefully win.
I like your philosophy here at the World Series. You know, guys like Mike Leah just play everything every single day. You decided to take a few days off. Your wife is in town, you know, to relax and get back at it next week.
It's important to love life.
Right.
And I found if I play poker all day, every day, I maybe don't enjoy life so much. But it's better than doing most other things. So
it's also
not so bad.
Important to know that many people might not know this, but Las Vegas is much more than just casinos and poker rooms. It's got some really, there's some cool parts to Las Vegas as well.
This is a great place. We've been shopping. We went out to see a comedy show. We've walked up and down the strip, went to some fun shops. We've had a good time. There's a lot to do here, especially if you've never been here before. I mean,
yeah.
Do not come here and only stay in the casino gambling.
Let's take a look at the standings so far. Sorry, the fight card. Let's take a look at this fight card. Look at this. Montreal Nationals, top of the league. 115 points for Marc-Andre Ladouceur's team. He is, of course, the team manager for the Nationals. Facing a very tough opponent here in Igor Yaroshevsky. Igor's been running wild since the 2015 World Series of Poker, where he was challenging for the Player of the Year title. Really had a great WSOP in Vegas and in Berlin. He is in the cube today for the Wolverines. The Wolverines sit second in the Eurasian Conference. They'll need those points in order to surpass London, at least temporarily. And Montreal, boy, to the riches go the spoils. Maybe another 9 points today would seriously put them in great situation. Jonathan, I mentioned earlier how for the Nationals, it's a team effort. All 6 players have been playing so well. Talk about maybe the mighty Nationals.
I mean, they're doing great. They're crushing. And I have to root for Moscow today because any points to go to the European Conference get out of the American Conference. Right. And we want as many points to go that way as possible.
All right, we'll be back with Jonathan. I have a few more questions for him. But first, let's go to Laura Cornelius. She's on the floor in front of the cube for an interview.
I am indeed. Joining me now, Igor Yaroshevsky of the Moscow Wolverines and Marc-Andre Ladouceur of the Montreal Nationals. Let's start with you, Igor. Excited to play in the cube, first of all?
Sorry.
He's so excited he can't even talk.
I want to win. I don't know.
That's
Let's
all
go.
we need to know. He wants to win. What's your response to that?
You don't have any Russian to spit at in there to help him out a bit.
Привет.
Привет.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool to be here. We've been hearing about this cube for so long now.
It's not cold in there.
It's not cold in there.
No,
we're gonna be wearing shorts and t-shirt. We should be all right.
You'll see.
Right.
But you're excited to play
Yeah,
anyway.
it's really cool. Coming in here, got a nice little lead there for the Montreal team, so hoping to bring that even further.
A nice little lead, just at like over 15 points or something like that. It's a crazy lead. You've been doing so well, and you're the manager of this team. That must make you feel pumped.
Well, everybody's been playing pretty well. I think we've run pretty well also. It's really cool to be part of a team where everybody's so into it, and everyone's been having some success. So my turn now to put up some points on the board.
Yeah, we've only seen you, in fact, in one game. It was versus Olivier Bousquet. It was actually a really entertaining match, and you played really well, but you just got unlucky.
Yeah, well, it was fun. Could have gone either way. Olivier is one of the top in the world, so it was good to be able to match up versus him. And then I know Igor is a good heads-up player as well, so another tough match.
Have you played each other before much in Heads Up?
No.
Not in heads
No.
up.
First
That's
time.
brand new, yeah.
All right.
I was hearing all about Igor's pedigree here walking in, so that'll be an interesting match.
We are excited to see it. These guys are about to enter the cube for the first game of 3. Back to you guys at the desk.
Thank you, Laura. Both players, by the way, played at the GPI World Cup in 2015. Marc-Andre, of course, representing Canada, and Igor representing Team Ukraine, one of the rising forces in poker. So it was great to see them both at the World Cup in Malta last year. Jonathan, one thing you mentioned during your interview with Laura earlier today that I really enjoyed is how that the team isn't faring so well. We'll take a look at the standings in a few moments of the Americas, but that you're taking it 3 points, 6 points, 9 points at a time. That there's nothing you can do. You're not going to pick up 29 points today. Therefore, you were looking for 6 points. That's important, I believe.
Well, especially in heads-up poker, you're just trying to win the match. It's not like we're playing six-handed where maybe you play much more aggressively, recognizing maybe you get 0 points or maybe you win. But in heads-up, you just have to take each match one at a time.
Very good. Let's
But
take. No, go ahead.
We're the Las Vegas Live pros.
That's
and
right.
Now we're playing live poker. So this is our arena. We get off the online game. Let's
really
use
good.
those live reads and crush them.
Well said. Let's take a look at those America's standings. Good news for the moneymakers. They did go up in the, move up from the basement. That's always a good thing. We talked about the Nationals, 115 points so far. The cream of the crop when it comes to the GPL. All 6 players playing so well. I guess 5 of the 6 players. I think Ladouceur has a little to prove here today in the cube. The LA Sunset off 6 points coming off from Aaron Paul. 101 points for that team. The New York Rounders, we will see Jason Wheeler in the cube later on this week. That'll be entertaining. Sao Paulo, who's coming off a sweep by Felipe Ramos. Great job by him. We see the moneymakers who moving up as 1 spot. In San Francisco Rush, Jonathan Jaffe had a great Heat 1, but he's going to have more work to do later this week as this guy got enough points for the moneymakers to move up in the standings. Quickly, let's take a look at the Eurasian Conference standings. The good news for the Paris Aviators, they did lose this match, Leia losing to Jonathan Little. The good news, they do move up in the standings. That's never a bad thing. London still the cream in the conference, 100 points, the only team with 100 points in the conference. The Wolverines have a chance to move up in first place, at least temporarily, with a win, with a sweep later on today, actually with the actual match victory. We've got Paris, we've got Hong Kong, Berlin, and then the Rome Emperors, Jonathan. We talk about the moneymakers being in trouble, but the Rome Emperors are in major trouble.
They are really in the basement.
They are in the super basement, I believe is what it's called. Yeah, it's been a rough start to the year. Max Pescatori has talked about that. We'll see a lot more Mustafa Kinnett, I think, in the coming weeks in order to secure some points for that team. I think the players are almost ready to enter that cube. Jonathan did that earlier today. It was a very frightening scene. Let's take you to the match.
Players, please enter the cube.
Whenever I had to shut the door earlier today, there was a bag of rocks holding the door shut.
Yes.
It weighed about 50 pounds. But I made it happen.
Starting now?
It's exciting when you get in the cube. You don't really know what's going on, and then you look down and you have some cards.
Right.
It's time to play.
Okay. 200, 400.
Igor's getting hydrated already. Igor's from the Ukraine, and my mother-in-law is from the Ukraine.
Oh, I
so they both must be very nice people.
Let it go, Igor.
Already talking. Men 3-bets from Igor.
First hand.
He may not understand how to use the application yet.
Yeah.
I had a few little mistakes in my game, and
Sizing. You just misclicked.
you figure it out
There's no way
eventually.
you meant to do that.
It's first hand.
Yeah.
Kind of an action board.
Very much so.
In a men 3-bet pot, you typically don't expect the men 3-better to have much on 8-7-6, but when it's a misclick, you could have anything, especially if you meant to call. This is a spot where Mark has to worry about a lot of turn cards, so there's always some merit in raising and just picking up your equity, picking up the pot if your opponent doesn't have much. And you could probably be happy enough playing a big pot with bottom 2 pair here, but if a lot of money goes in, you have to recognize that bottom 2 pair is not in amazing shape too often. Just because your opponent's going to be getting in with straights, flushes, and good draws, and better made hands, like 2 pair. So it's a spot where you can raise for value, but if you get re-raised, you're never loving it. Like, imagine if Igor just had Jack of Spades, 5 of Diamonds here. He'd be in fine shape.
Yeah.
He happens to not be in fine shape with this hand, but it's a spot where Igor could just easily have something. Once Igor gets raised, anytime you have the worst possible draw, you usually want to get rid of the worst possible draw, because if your opponent has a draw, you're in bad shape, and if they have a made hand, you're in bad shape. And as we see here, he has an open-ended straight draw and an overcard, but he only has 28% equity. I feel like earlier today, me and Mike both played pretty quickly, but so far already, these players are burning a fifth of their time bank on the first hand, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that was noted. You guys did play very quickly. Only once did someone go in the tank for over a minute, and that was you for about 1 minute and 20 seconds, I believe.
Yeah, and I'd never think. So
That's right.
I actually studied Mike's games, and he actually got in time bank trouble in some of his previous games,
Yes.
but I think that's because he was just explaining everything. And it's not like he ever got in horrible shape.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I couldn't find it either.
Good fold here.
Igor was looking for the fold button.
Right.
The fold, you have to shove the cards out of the top of the iPad. They want you to not fold.
That's true. No, that was actually done purposely so that there's no misclicks or some bad issues. You actually have to fold both cards, as you found out, Jonathan. If you just fold one, that card comes back, but it is not a different card. This is not draw poker. The same card comes back.
You know that's going to happen eventually. Someone's going to fold one card and they'll get something different.
That's right.
They're going to look down and they're going to have aces and they're going to win. Can you imagine you get one redeal every game? That would be so sweet. It'd be like Hold'em X. You can change some of the cards around.
There you go. If you missed the action yesterday, Kevin McPhee actually fake folding a few times, trying to induce action from his opponent.
Mike Leah did that a bit today, but I just sat there. I did not. I figured it out real. I saw that yesterday. I already learned that trick. I wasn't following the action. I was busy talking. Was there a continuation bet on the flop? Probably.
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 Gonna have to make it big.
Do we know if Igor speaks much English?
He does, yeah.
Okay.
His English is actually quite good.
Okay.
Of course, not compared maybe to Marc-Andre, who's more comfortable in the language, but no, he absolutely does.
Because it's relevant if he has any idea what Mark's saying, or if it's just
Right.
irrelevant. You know, like if I got in there and he spoke Russian to me, I'd have no clue what he was saying. So I mean, he could say whatever he wants. It doesn't
That's
matter.
right.
But if he knows what he's saying, it's relevant. Like he's saying, let it go or bet big. It's unnerving when your opponent's yelling commands to you. So Mark turning his hand into a bluff on the river, it seems, trying to get Igor to fold ace highs. Probably a good idea, although we really don't know much about Igor's calling down tendencies. I tried to quickly watch some of his games before before I got in the commentary booth, and it seemed like Igor just played good, tight, aggressive. Didn't seem like he was doing anything too crazy, but I only had six max games to watch, and I don't think he got heads up in any of them.
I believe he might have lost a live in one of them, but you're right.
Okay.
But I think that's a Moscow, what we've seen, Moscow seems to be playing those six maxes that way, Jonathan, where they're very careful at first, trying to bank 1, 2, or 3 points, and then they'll open a play. It does seem to be a team strategy, and Anatoly Filatov did say that they would be playing differently than any other team with their philosophy, and I think that's what he might have been talking about. We've seen that from most of their play this year, except Vladimir Troyanovsky, because he likes to splash the pot a time or two.
Looks like Igor's considering putting a raise in here. He's taking his time. Unless he again lost the fold button. But he does finally fold.
You did fold.
I fold.
All right.
I think in the 6-max games, I think like average points is something like 3 points per game. Is
3
that right?
points, correct.
So I mean,
Yep.
if you just get 2 or more, you're never going to be down so much. Whereas if you just get multiple zeros, it's very, very bad.
It hurts you.
Unless you're just going to either get zeros or wins. You because then you're averaging 4 points. Imagine like you know you're going to take first or last. That's fine because you're getting 4.
True.
But that's not how poker works.
That's right.
It's sort of like the 6 max games are sort of a weird final table scenario where you're already in the money. So there's, well, kind of like you're already in the money. It's not like a regular sit and go where first or second get money and everybody else gets nothing. Here you actually do get something.
Yeah, 5 of the 6 actually do score, you're right.
Big pot brewing already with a 7-2 offsuit. Igor's not afraid.
I'm looking at you thinking it's your turn to play.
It's always interesting watching people get into the cube for the first time because there is a little bit of a learning curve with any new device, any new program to play with. And I was, I guess, smart enough to show up here about an hour early and get to play on it. I played a heads-up match versus my wife, and that was very beneficial because I pretty much knew what I was doing by the time it came time to play. And I know both these players didn't have a ton of time to actually play ahead of time. So they may be a little bit confused.
Jonathan, we all want to know who won that match between you and your wife.
Well, actually, we got about halfway through, and I was holding my own, and then I let her play against Mike for a while, and she crushed Mike. So it worked out well.
Maybe Laura will tell us in the ear here.
Laura.
For everyone at home, trying to follow the action, make sure you look for the person who has the red around their name. That's how you know who it is on. Also, you can look at their time bank, and if their time bank's going down, it means that that's on them. If you don't know what to look for, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to follow, but that's the trick. Look at whose clock is going down. Igor's electing to do a little bit larger than a min raise, which I think is a good strategy versus good players because...
I'm actually serious. I'm not sure where to go to fold.
It's like...
Oh, like this?
Yeah.
Oh, sick.
It's a fold. First time you fold, you know?
It's the first time he's folded this match. Hand number 5.
4, yeah.
It's Marc-Andre's world. We're just living in it.
Interesting he folded that hand. He had 9-5 or something like that. I'm probably defending that. But if your opponent min raises, you pretty much have to be defending hands like that. But whenever they do make it a little bit larger, it makes your opponent fold out a larger portion of their range, and that's probably a good idea versus players who play well. And certainly Mark plays very great.
If you're wondering why Mark is not wearing his Montreal Nationals jersey, it has nothing to do with him looking that good in that blue shirt. You can blame FedEx or UPS as the Montreal jerseys have yet to arrive.
Hello, Igor.
Igor walking around.
Yeah, there it is.
Irugi on Twitch asking, why did the players not have a chance to play with the software before? Well, Jonathan just mentioned that the players actually do have that opportunity. Unfortunately for Mark, he literally got here around midnight last night and hit the gym this morning, so he was here very much last minute. So did get a little crash course, but probably not as much as he would have wanted to.
They said in the email to me that you're welcome to show up early and play around on the program, so I showed up before anyone from the Global Poker League showed up.
That is correct.
I showed up and I was waiting on them to open the door.
We were a little late today.
But
Although working from home. Silver Poker asking, where is Stapes? Stapes will be back on Friday. Stapes had a prior commitment, which we knew about. He is on the East Coast. Actually, not East Coast. Fargo, North Dakota. I mean, when you leave Las Vegas, you go to Fargo. Hello to our friends in Fargo. That is where Stapes is. You can meet him there. If you are on Tinder, Joe will be meeting you at a local Fargo bar.
Hey, girls.
Yeah, Joe likes the Tinder.
Tinder came around too late for me. I never got to play on it. I've really missed out.
No, you did well for yourself, sir.
Right, I didn't get my wife on Tinder.
That's right.
Everyone else will from now until the end of time, probably.
Right.
But found my wife the old-fashioned way at a poker tournament.
Oh, well, there you go. I thought you were going to say through the phone book like we did in high school and trying to find the number.
That's what you used to go through the list and like, this sounds like a female name.
That's
I'll
right.
call her. Kind of a weird bet by Igor.
There too.
Thin value. Doesn't get paid. It's always interesting when you make a thin value bet and your opponent folds slightly worse. It almost implies that the value bet was too thin because your opponent folded a worse hand. And he's not, I don't think he's bluffing. I mean, maybe he was bluffing, but don't necessarily think so. Igor min-raised a hand or two earlier with 8-5 off, or maybe it was the previous hand with 8-5 offsuit. So it's kind of interesting to see what he's doing with his pre-flop raise sizing. And here he does 2060 instead of a min-raise. So I don't know if that has anything to do with the strength of his hand, but it's always worth being aware of. Interesting, Mark's 3-betting the 9-8 offsuit. This is a reasonable hand to call. Flops pretty well. Guess if you know your opponent is dominated, you might as well 3-bet it. It's a spot where if Mark bets and gets a lot of action, he's not actually loving his hand, even though he does have a pair and a draw, because your opponent's going to have either better draws or better pairs. So I'd probably check in this spot or bet small. If you bet small, you can get called by worse stuff. He elects to bet about half pot. That's the spot where if you check, you're not so concerned about many hands because you have a lot there. If it goes check-check, you're just loving it. And if it, you're not really so concerned with too many cards. But betting's always fine. Betting's good. I'm a big fan of betting a lot. If you bet, your opponents can fold.
Playing defense. Yes.
So Mark limped this hand, I believe. Or did he limp? Oh, no, I'm sorry. He raised. Igor called and then snap checked. Igor's playing very fast. Now, at least pre-flop. Maybe in the future, GPL could have something that's like a hand history that runs on the side of the screen. Because when the players act very quickly, if you miss it, you just miss it.
Yeah, that's actually one of the items in development as we speak. Jonathan, great point.
Perfect. Because like right now, I mean, I was just staring right at the screen. I'm a hair lost as to what was happening. Because now we found ourselves on the turn, and Igor's, he check called the flop, I believe, and now he's check raising the turn, and that's, I'd like to be sure that's what's happening. And sure enough, he does check raise a turn. Pretty aggressive play. I would not have expected this from Igor from what I saw in the six-handed games, and that's great. I mean, you want to be the guy who's doing kind of out-of-line stuff and unpredictable things.
Staring his opponent down here, too.
Yeah, these live poker tells are actually a thing in the cube. There's a spot against Mike Leah where he made it kind of clear that he thought whenever I sort of broke character and looked out of the cube that he thought I had it. And so once I recognized that, I did it later with a bluff, and it worked. And you know, if you pick up something on your opponent, you don't want to let them know you picked up something on your opponent. Because like if he just made no comment and folded in that spot, I probably would not have done it later, and I would not have attempted that bluff later. And I kind of had the general idea of sort of looking roughly at my opponent's chest most of the time. And that'll give you peripheral vision of their face, of their hands, etc. And it's a pretty easy way to not be all over the place. I am not good at being all over the place like some of the other players. I have no personality.
Disagree. Jonathan Little getting a lot of love in our Twitch chat. Should not be surprised by that.
Jonathan
thank you. Little, one of the, if not the foremost experts when it comes to explaining the game. And I've talked about that in meetings in the office, Jonathan, that I myself have learned so much by watching your game. So thank you for that. But you get to share that info with the world, and that's I think we all appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to help. I like helping people who want to learn. Like if you have a desire to get good at poker, I'm happy to help you, because I know that I had a desire to get good at poker, and I was just looking for anyone who would help me out, and I found a few people and worked hard, and here I am today. So interesting, Igor elects to 3-bet the ace-6 offsuit. This is another hand I typically call with, because if you re-raise and get called, well, ace-6 is not so good out of position, and quite often you're going to be somewhat dominated if a reasonable amount of money goes in the pot. I'm much happier like 4-betting this hand. Like say I was in Mark's spot and I raise an Igor 3-bet me, I would consider 4-betting ace-6 offsuit, because then it's not such a great hand to see a flop with. But with these stacks, you don't want to play big pots, at least.
Right.
Unless you think you have I mean, the times you want to play big pots are when you think that you have a disadvantage versus your opponent. And maybe Igor feels that, or maybe just wants to really ramp up the aggression because he thinks Mark is going to fold too often. It's tough to know what good players think. Shout out to Rita Little.
Little.
That's my mother in the Twitch chat.
That's why she's been so nice. That's actually, she's the only one who said you're great, Jonathan, and that's why I read that.
That makes sense.
She is perfect. Hello, Rita.
Hello, Rita. So Mark is electing to turn his hand into a bluff, and Igor sticks around. That's a kind of wide call. If I was in Igor's shoes, I would consider leading this river, because if you check, Mark has a very free bet if he feels like making it on this straight-ish board. I actually had a very similar spot versus Mike earlier where the board ran out of straight. It may have been this exact straight. And I actually turned a straight, and then the river counterfeited me. So, I mean, I bluffed, and it put Mike in a bad spot. And here Mark's going to bluff, and it's going to put Igor in a bad spot because he's calling to chop. Interesting. Did he go check? Just said Mark checked. Check. I think that's a pretty free bet there. But if you think your opponent's never folding, then you might as well not bet. That's a spot, though, given Igor 3-bet pre-flop, that he should not have so many 10s in his range, and Mark should have a lot of 10s.
Mentioned earlier the successes of Igor Yaroshevsky at the World Series of Poker. No bracelet last year, but his second-place finish in the 5K Turbo. The winner of that event, Kevin McPhee of the New York Rounders.
Wow. So everyone in the Global Poker League is winning.
That's right. Yeah,
well,
there's a lot of running.
Most of them.
That's right. Yeah, Luno and Danz are making work at the WSOP today again. Another deep run for both.
So here, Mark limps with 7-5 offsuit. Igor raises. I imagine Mark's just going to fold. And it's certainly fine, but notice Mark folded a hand that was very dominated there. And that's actually not a great result for Igor, because when your opponent is very dominated, you prefer they stick around in the pot. But at the same time, you do want to set up a dynamic such that your opponent just can't limp in whenever he feels like it. So here Igor raised, Mark defended. Comes queen 9-5, and Igor bets the swap. I think betting or checking is fine. The problem is when you bet and get called, you're not loving it. Mark does stick around, though, with ace high. So you can get called by some worse hands. Not many, but some. Igor's continuing to bet. Kind of surprised he's not checking at this point, because, for the same reason I just said, that if you bet, is your opponent really going to stick around with ace 10, ace jack? You might stick around with ace 8, but you have 2 8s. Might stick around with ace 7, but probably not. And of course, your opponent's always calling with a queen or a 9 there, so you're never making a better hand fold. There were a lot of low cards he could have, though, that might stick around with pairs plus straight draws. Look at them sweating. That's great. This is real poker.
We were mentioning earlier, Jonathan, the fact that there is air conditioning tubes or vents that go into the cube, but that does not help you guys out too much.
I'm pretty sure they turn them off whenever we're playing. It was actually freezing out there between the games because they run a ton of air conditioning units, and then I guess they stop it because of the air conditioning units making sound. So it's freezing before the matches. You get in the sauna for a while, and then you come out, and then you freeze again.
AC also cut because the grills demand a sweaty Marc-Andre Ladouceur, and who can blame them?
Oh, yeah.
Back to Igor in 2015, his WSOP run also took him to a WPT event at the LAPC. Final table, finished 4th in that event. First place, moneymaker Anthony Zeno. Second place finisher, a man that you got to know a bit earlier today, Paris Aviator Mike Leah. So
wow, so he's just
results.
Getting crushed by the moneymakers. He
That's
loses
right.
to Zeno, he loses to me. He might be the worst heads-up player.
Terrible. I feel bad for him. Such a good guy, too.
This is a spot where I think Igor should strongly consider bluffing, given he has nothing. Whenever you have nothing by the river and the turn goes check-check, it's never bad to try to bluff. Looks like he doesn't bet too big, which kind of screams marginal value, which is fine because you're trying to make your opponent think you have a marginal value hand when you're bluffing. And it does work. Gets Mark to fold the best hand, a pair. It's hard to fold a pair heads up, but Mark gets out of the way no problem. Interesting to see if Mark 3-bets or calls with the king-queen. You can go either way. It's certainly a strong value hand. Notice Mark does only have 20 big blinds, so maybe he's just going to shove all in. Whenever you're playing, you actually don't see that your opponent has 19 big blinds. It just kind of shows the meter.
Got him. He says yes.
I'm ready to fold.
Yeah, you were ready.
If you're playing in the cube, do not make it obvious you're ready to fold.
Right.
I almost did that a time or two because, I mean, I don't even know why I almost did it, but whenever you have nothing and your opponent's thinking like, all right, let's go. You also have to be careful that you don't double check your cards randomly out of turn. I almost did that a time or two whenever there was 3 spades out there or something. So Igor just, I mean, the blinds have gotten pretty high. The players have taken their time. I mean, notice both players have burned half their time making 20 hands, which is pretty slow, right?
Yeah,
I mean, they're
for
playing
sure.
pretty slow.
Yep.
And that's why the blinds are so high. I mean, me and Mike played what I felt was pretty deep stack poker for a long time because none of our decisions took too long. But here, these guys are playing just super shallow at this point. Because notice if Mark doubles, then they're still going to be playing 20 big blind poker because Igor's only going to have 20 big blinds at that point. So Igor's sticking with a raising strategy with these 20 big blind stacks. You could opt to limp. I mean,
I'm gonna go again.
I was studying a lot of 20 big blind poker stuff before today because I knew we'd get there at some point. And limping's good. Limping's strong if your opponents will not necessarily be very aggressive versus it. And I think a lot of players are not very aggressive.
Russian, don't do it.
From Ukraine.
There, finally he's told him. Finally, he just snapped. There's some.
I was about to say this is a hand that Mark could easily limp, and he does limp it. And if he does get shoved on or raise, he can conceivably call pretty easily. Whereas if he raises and gets shoved on, it's not so great to call off. And you know, here he's probably going to lose a little pot, and that's okay. He's not getting stacked when he happens to be against a better hand. He got to see a flop with the best hand. A lot of good things happen whenever you're limping in position. And I was just trying to get to showdown what's probably the best hand. Hello to the Twitch chat. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who hate me. And some who like me okay. I'm happy you're all here. I know you could be watching any other Twitch stream.
Oh, they're loving it.
We're glad to have you here on the Global Poker League. So Igor makes a min bet on the river. Very interesting. Obviously for thin value, sort of a blocking type bet. And once you figure out your opponents make these bets with hands like Igor has, you can put them in pretty bad shape just by raising them relentlessly. Of course, Igor may just min bet and then call off no problem, in which case then he knows what he's setting up. I mean, this is a play you can use against kind of good players who recognize your small bet's weak. Then they're just obviously going to raise it. When they obviously raise it, you can snap them off no problem. But here, notice Mark recognized what was happening. He just folds. It's tough to fold in that spot, but if you are a very strong, disciplined player, you know you play well, you can be fine folding in that spot. It's tough folding when you could just easily have the best hand. But if your opponent's range there is bottom pairs and top pairs, then, or bottom pairs and reasonably strong ace highs and whatnot, you just fold. Someone asked, why is 20 big blinds a line in the sand? It's not necessarily a line in the sand. I mean, the lines are blurred, but your strategies do change as your stack size gets deeper because with 20 big blinds, you don't really want to be raising and then folding too often because if you raise and fold, you're giving away 10% of your stack. You can't really do that too many times before you just blind it off significantly. Not necessarily blind it off, but raise and fold it off. Whereas with a 50 big blind stack, for example, you can give away 2 big blinds here and there, especially if your opponent's shoving because they're risking a ton. So min raising is a very good strategy with a short stack if your opponents fold too much. But this is the Global Poker League. You have to give your opponents some respect for recognizing that is sort of a base level strategy to attack. And for that reason, I haven't even really attempted that too much versus many of my opponents. We're just min-raising everything. But I mean, maybe I should try it. Certainly want to see what your opponents are capable of. If they're going to fold too often, then run them over. But I don't think either of these two guys are going to be easy to run over. They do not look like pushover players.
Some comments in the chat about the fact that they're very stoic compared to some of the games we've seen. We've seen Jeff Gross and Felipe Ramos play soccer inside the cube. The first part, we were talking about a French-Canadian playing a Ukrainian, so there's maybe a language barrier there, but they're both very comfortable in English. I really do think there's some pressure here for Marc-Andre. He's the only player that's not performing well for his team, and he doesn't like that. For Yaroshevsky, it's the same thing. I know that Anatoly Filatov expects a ton out of his Wolverines, and it's their first time in the cube. It does take a while to adjust.
Interesting here that Igor check called the flop. I think it was a min-raise pot and then a small bet from Igor. Interesting that he decided to float the flop from out of position with Jack-High. I think that's a good strategy versus players who are very straightforward, and I don't necessarily know if Mark is very straightforward. Also, some people are just more serious when they play poker. I mean, like I didn't talk much, and I don't really plan to talk much in the cube. I do not have a good table talking presence or strategy. I don't even know how to do it. I have no experience with it. And I'm sure not going to try it when I'm playing a high-pressure Global Poker League match for the first time. Igor gets there. This was a limped pot, so Igor is electing to limp at least some of the bad hands. Notice here Mark does not try to steal the pot. He probably thinks Igor has a lot of ace-highs, queen-highs, marginal pairs. And if your opponent has that, by the time you get to the river, they're not going to fold to one bet. So there's no point in attempting to bluff.
Our friend Rita Little right on point again, saying that there is something to be said about them being stoic. There's some energy coming out of there as well. The intensity, you can feel that on air as well.
They're trying to win.
Yeah, that's right.
This is not a joke to these players. They are doing their best. I don't think very many people are going into the cube thinking, we'll just go have a good time.
No.
Or maybe some of them are, but I know I sure wasn't. I know Mike Leah sure wasn't. These players clearly aren't. They are trying to pick up points for their team. This is incredibly important to them. It's their reputation and their team's reputation. And if you lose the first game, you can get swept, and then that's a disaster.
Yeah, that hurts. That hurts. Yeah, we've seen the attitude change in the cube when you're down 2-0. It is just very, very bad. Chris Moorman wanted to destroy the cube at some point as he was trailing to Scott Ball. He did get that third match in the end.
Especially to Scott Ball. Scott Ball's a bit of a trash talker, and he'll get under your skin pretty easily.
Scott Ball was fantastic. Did exactly what he needed to do against someone of Moorman's ilk.
Igor slow playing a bit here, which is probably a good strategy. I believe he check called flop. Mark deciding if he should go for it. Scary sitting in the cube because you know for a fact Igor is just staring down Mark at this point. Mark sitting here staring at an iPad. And it's a weird feeling when you know this guy's looking at you.
Didn't need it. Diamonds.
That's a lie. Well, Igor's certainly not folding. He's trying to decide between going all in and calling. I imagine he's probably just going to shove here. There are a decent amount of draws and also made hands that Mark could have. So he does shove. Mark's, of course, going to fold.
All right.
Mark is not having much luck. Igor has made some hands, and when your opponent makes some hands, there's not a whole lot you can do. So Igor limps here with the pocket tens, trying to get out of line a little bit, trying to get Mark to shove wider than he should, perhaps. Now Igor's probably just going to be content to check down, but he does bet the flop, I guess. Probably just want to check on that board, because if your opponent has any piece of the board, he's never folding with a short stack. If he calls, you're not loving it anymore. He's not going to call you with pocket sixes on ace, king, queen, for example, or 9-8. Not very much left in that. What is that thing? Is it a microphone? What did that was?
I don't know what the background is. That is his chips. It goes up and down depending on how many chips he's got.
That's his chip microphone.
That's right.
He's almost out of chips in his microphone. Look, he's limping a game of pocket queens. He is really trying to get Marc to shove wide. Marc's not doing it, though. Wow, they give it to him. I like the limping with a very short stack if you have some sort of a dynamic where you should be limping with a short stack. But right here, I mean, once stacks get down to 7 or 8 big blinds or less, I'm usually just shoving or folding everything. And usually just shoving everything. So now Marc has to decide, can I ever call here and make it look like I'm going to fold to additional pressure? And he has 19K in his stack. You could probably call there if you feel like it, but shoving's of course fine. Igor has an easy call. It says the pot's 100K. It's not actually 100K because
That was clean.
Marc's only all in for 22,000.
Back in there. He let me in there.
Back in business.
Wow, we may have another all in right here. So Marc has 42,000. He's probably going to raise, or he may limp. If he does limp or raise, Igor could easily jam. Probably should jam. Jam means go all in. Push, jam, shove, all in. They're all the same thing.
They all work.
They all work, but everyone doesn't know that those words mean the same thing.
They all usually mean the end of my tournament.
Yeah.
For me.
And Igor does make a fine shove. I think
Good
it's
luck, my friend.
standard.
Oh. Yeah. Ooh.
They give it to Igor. He is happy.
My son.
Igor scoops the first one.
Game 2. So we got a little break there.
Well, Jonathan, so much for lack of emotion. Mr. Yaroshevsky, very happy with that result. And of course, those 3 points for the team. I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of pressure on this team. Filatov is really hard on his players, but that's expected. The Russian, the Ukrainian community, the Polish community are all behind this team. So a lot of pressure, national pride on the line.
They have 3 countries?
That's right.
That doesn't seem
Represented by 3 countries.
We're representing a city over here.
That's right. That's right. No, but a lot of people are supporting that team from the Moscow Wolverines, so it's great to see them pick up those first 3 points. Bad news, I guess, for Montreal, but they've got a lot of points to spare at the moment, so we shouldn't feel too bad for them. What did you think about this match? I think it was quite entertaining.
Well, Marc certainly does not feel like he has points to spare.
Right.
He's not trying to give away his points. Right. But I thought it was a good match. I mean, both players played well. I think they were pretty aggressive, and it was a tough match for Marc. He just did not have the cards, and then he finally got it in good at the end. I mean, he got it in great twice at the end, and didn't win. Whenever you don't win your all-ins, you're going to lose.
Right.
And that is exactly what happened.
We talked earlier about those 3 points, the first 3 points, and how comfortable you get. Maybe a little too comfortable if you grab those first 6 points, but you want to win that first out of 3, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
You cannot get swept if you win the first 3, and
That's
that
right.
makes you feel great. No matter what, it's okay.
No, Jonathan, to be honest, you don't know this feeling. You do not know the feeling to being swept. You don't even know the feeling of losing a heads-up match so far. But pretend, just let us know. We always talk about the difference between losing 6-3, which is a 3-point difference in points, and 9-0, which is 9 points. So that gap is huge. But talk to me about heart and pride-wise, getting swept. How bad would that feel?
It would be horrible. Right. And if you play enough heads-up matches, you put yourself out there enough. It will happen eventually.
Right.
I mean, I went back and watched some of the matches the other day, and you see players who play great, and they just get pooped on.
Yeah.
They lose every hand they play, and there's nothing they can do about it. And whenever you lose in that manner, it doesn't really feel so bad because you know it's kind of unavoidable. But if you go out there and make some speculative plays, maybe you get out of line in some spots, and you didn't have to go broke in those spots, it feels significantly worse, at least from my point of view.
What about the fact if you're Jeff Gross, for example, and Felipe Ramos was talking about a sweeping song that they have in Brazil, and actually tweeted it out to him at the World Series. So even hours after this match, poor Jeff Gross is still feeling the brunt. So I think that's more it is, right? The guy has so much, there's so many bragging rights there, sweeping someone, and just Felipe Ramos very politely, egging him on a bit, right? So if you're Jeff Gross, you're never going to live that down.
No, he's going to be the guy who got swept.
That's right, by a Brazilian song.
It's tough to get swept by the Brazilians.
That's right. We have Laura Cornelius now on the floor with our 2 participants. Laura, what you got?
Thanks, guys. Igor Yaroshevsky winning the first one, 3 points for the Moscow Wolverines. He said he came to win, and he did do the first one. Well done.
I happy. My captain, I think, will be happy too. Anatoly, I take it 3 points. Let's do it more.
You're in the good books. There are still 2 games to go, though. I thought you were nearly going to turn that around with that 5-2 hand, but not quite.
Yeah, I thought I had a shot right after that when we had this matchup with Jax versus A6. But I was hearing Jonathan talking about that Brazilian sweeping song. I'm just hoping I'm not. This is not going to be playing all month long here for me.
It won't be a Brazilian one. It'll be a Ukrainian one.
Yeah.
Do we know a Ukrainian song?
Not much.
We'll find one.
I don't know.
The sweep is on for the Moscow Wolverines. Are you going to let that happen?
No, this is not going to happen. We've got a lot of poker to play still.
Mind you, there's not much pressure on you. You're 14 points clear.
No, I'm all good. We're in Vegas. Life is great. Beautiful outside. Got some tournaments to play ahead and first place in GPL. So, no, everything's good. We're still looking to get some points here, though.
It would be better if you could win some points for your team.
All right.
Indeed. Right, we're going to head back to the desk very shortly, just after this quick break.
Hello. Hey, let's take you to this commercial.
Can't get enough of the GPL? Head over to globalpokerleague.com for the most complete and up-to-date standings, schedule, stats, and information on your favorite team, as well as full-length match replays, highlights, and epic hands from all of our matches, and much, much more.
Body's moving slow. 'Cause this love is all night. Moving faster than the sun. Explosions in the sky.
And we are back here. Eric Danis, joined by the great Jonathan Little, who provided expert commentary in that first game. Jonathan, as you are always researching, doing your job, you pointed something out about the fact that Igor Yaroshevsky was actually a wildcard pick for the Moscow Wolverines. I think during draft day, Jonathan, you were there. The commentators, we were a little shocked that Sergei Lebedev was picked up by the team and not Yaroshevsky at that point. Lebedev, not well known necessarily in maybe for us here, the tournament fans, but he does play a lot of high stakes games. So I do believe that Anatoly Filatov thought that might be a reason he might be selected by another team. Igor Yaroshevsky is a top 100 player, and he's been around for quite some time. I guess the gamble paid off that that Filatov was hoping that Yaroshevsky would not go in the draft, and he could add a top 100 player as his wildcard pick.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, if you can pick up a guy who has great results for a wildcard pick, that's fantastic, and that seems to be what they did, and he's putting up reasonably good results so far.
Yeah, sorry, we shouldn't be surprised, as the Wolverines were so well prepared for this draft and really knew exactly the players they wanted to pick. I think as long as Dmitry Urbanovich was going to be available to them, everything else would have been scot-free. And look at them now, still riding high in the top 2 in the GPL in the Eurasian Conference. So we shouldn't expect anything other than that. I think it's time to take you to Game 2. A lot riding on the line for the Nationals here. Let's take you to the Cube. Actually, let's take a few seconds here. The players are actually getting set up.
Well, if Moscow wins this match, they will be in first place.
They'll be in first place. And as we know, guest commissioner Liv Boré will not be happy. Olivia being very tough on her players, and especially her significant other, Igor Kurganov. He's felt the brunt, the Boré brunt. She's played so well, Jonathan, so she's got the bragging rights on the players. She expects and demands a lot of results from the team.
They're in trouble.
All right, let's take you to the Cube now. Jonathan is a little intimidated by the great Liv Boré, as am I.
Let's go.
All right.
Good luck.
Good luck, sir.
First hand, Mark is already dominated. It's not where you want to be. Flop helps him out, though. Some people may look at this and think, wow, both players have flush draws. That's pretty good, but both players have bad flush draws. Remember, both players have bad flush draws, and neither of them are loving it. Mark does throw out a bet. This is an interesting spot where Igor could conceivably call if he feels like it, because king high could be good, and his bad draw could be good. And that's usually fine as long as the pot's small. But once the pot starts to grow pretty large, you don't really want to be in there anymore. So if Mark just continues barreling, Igor's probably going to find himself getting out of the way. But if the pot gets checked down, Igor could very easily have the best hand. Interesting to see if Mark continues firing here to try to get Igor off of a jack or a 5 or a bad club draw. Notice Igor's probably not going to fold a queen or a 10 of clubs at this point, or a king, of course. I imagine he's going to stick around. Kind of a sizable bet here. 2,600 into the 3,900 pot or so. I don't really see how Igor can fold here, but this is exactly what I was talking about, where if Mark fires again on the river, Igor's not going to have an easy decision at all. And notice he does just fold, right? And that's kind of the problem with calling out of position versus strong, aggressive players who will turn hands into bluffs. Interesting fold there with the king. I'm kind of surprised he folded given he turned a reasonable pair. But maybe he thinks Mark isn't barreling very often, which makes his flop check call better if you think your opponent's not barreling too often. But Mark's a good high-stakes online player, and good high-stakes online players know how to throw out barrels.
You're right. Yeah, we focused our attention on Igor in the first match, but Marc-Andre does have very impressive results as well, including, of course, back-to-back deep runs at the WSOP main event, which culminated in 2012, finishing 13th, that incredibly devastating ace-king hand where a flush did him in when the two players were all in pre-flop. Just a terrible situation for him, and a few hands later, both Gaël Bowman and Elizabeth Hill were eliminated.
Wow, that's a great memory.
Yeah.
How in the world do you remember that?
I'll be honest, Jonathan, as a fellow French-Canadian like Marc-Andre, that is a moment that French Canada will live in infamy. We were hoping and riding everything on Marc-Andre, and just the worst of coolers, ace-king, pre-flop all in, and a flush does you in when you're just a few steps away from the November 9.
Yeah, that's the opposite of lucky.
That is the opposite of lucky.
So are you rooting for Montreal? Are they your team?
No, I am very much not picking a team, but if Montreal wins, that'd be great.
Okay, I see. Notice here Mark is picking the 2.4x raise size. That's what I was doing as well in the cube, and I think that's probably a good strategy versus most players, because I think a lot of people are defending a little bit too wide. They're defending as if your opponents are min-raising, and making it a little bit bigger makes their defending with marginal hands not as good. So I was actually thinking about making it closer to 3x versus Mike Leah earlier today, because he was defending very wide. And if you just make it bigger and they defend very wide, they're starting to make pretty big errors with the bottom part of their range. So I might experiment with that next time I get in the cube, if I see my opponents calling a lot at least.
You mentioned during the match with Mike that someone had told you that Mike was a nit, but going off that Mike Leah and Anatoly Filatov match where Mike was just crazy, just a crazy monster playing so well, were you trying to get in his head there, or is that...
A little bit.
There you go. Good job.
I know Mike's not a nit. I've played with Mike a bunch,
right,
both online and live, and he's a tough player.
Yeah.
Anyone who has good results over 10 years is probably not a nit. We have Igor dialing in the 4-bet with a nothing. He's trying to figure out how much to type.
Oh, adding the $1. That tilts me, Jonathan. The 1 at the end, cannot stand it.
You actually can't put in the 1 at the end
on
the
I
Global
love this.
Poker League.
Thank you. I did not know this. I love this.
They round it down or up.
I like it.
4-bet and walk around thing.
Wow, that's interesting. 4 bets and then leaves. Well, if you know the hand's over, it's fine. But Mark does stick around versus the 4-bet with the ace-8 suited. Kind of a rough hand to stick around with, but it's certainly fine. The problem is that your opponent's 4-betting range is often a lot of ace-x, king-x, but then also nut hands. You beat all the ace-x and king-x, but you lose to all the nut hands, so you're kind of in there with a bluff catcher on most boards. But Especially if he makes it small, which I think he did, you pretty much have to stick around. Interesting, Igor checked. He may try to make his hand look like ace-x. Check back on the flop with ace-high, and then see what develops. It's not going to work out for him this time, though. So should Mark bet? I think Mark should probably check this, because Igor should have a ton of ace-x, which he's probably going to value bet. And sure enough, he does check, and Igor does bet. Now I have to see if Mark's going to raise immediately. It's a very strong line to raise here. It looks incredibly strong. The problem is if you check call, I mean, you may not get your opponent to bluff the river. I like how Mark's taking his time here, and he does call. I think this is a good call. He's going to have a tough time winning a huge pot here, but I think it's the only way to extract value when your opponent's bluffing. And when your opponent does have an ace, they're going to value bet the river anyway. So you win the same amount versus an ace most of the time. And you also get something out of the bluff sometimes. Like right here, if Igor does bet the king high on the river, it makes Mark's play fantastic.
Right.
If Igor checks the king high, maybe it doesn't make it so good. He's going for it. And I think he probably should go for it. He should have a lot of aces in his range here. A lot of ace king, ace queen, ace jack. Squarely in his range. So the pot's 1,600. I don't think he needs to bet too big. Something like, I was going to say something like 9 would be pretty sweet. It looks like you're trying to get value. So does Mark go all in?
Boy, I don't know.
I got myself in trouble earlier today going for a all-in with 2 pair, and my opponent snapped me off. Actually, he slow-rolled me.
Yeah, he did not snap you whatsoever.
He should have snapped me off.
Right.
He had the nuts. But here, the check raise all-in is going to not get called, right? So there's not really a ton of value in it. He's trying to get called by ace king, ace queen, and ace jack if he shoves. Or raises. And I don't know. I mean, I would check raise Igor here, I think, because Igor doesn't strike me as someone who's going to fold ace king. Maybe I'm wrong. It's just European kids do not fold.
Right. That's
So
confirmed.
You can go for a little bit thinner value versus European kids than you can versus tight old guys at the World Series of Poker. He does elect for the all-in.
Yeah, I think Igor felt that coming.
I wonder what kind of bluffing range Mark has here. Interesting spot.
Put that in the match.
He's got 1 and 2. For those that weren't too excited with these 2 players earlier on, I'm starting to be on board with Rita, our favorite. I like the intensity here, Jonathan. You mentioned that neither player likes to lose, and they both want to win so bad. And we see Igor really coming out of his shell, but Mark being very stoic and again focused on winning those next 3 points.
These guys are fighting. I mean, they're trying to win. They're not just going to sit here and play passive.
Right.
Let's see who makes the best hand poker. They are fighting for pots. And that's what a lot of heads-up poker is. I mean, you want to be the guy winning the pot when both players have marginal hands. And that's the spot where Igor was really trying to fight for a marginal pot where he thought his opponent may have a marginal hand. It didn't work out, but he's showing that he's at least trying. And that's great.
Marc-Andre does have 2 significant heads-up results in his career. A second-place finish at EPT Barcelona, the 10K heads-up. He eliminated Justin Bonomo in the semifinals. And Justin Bonomo comes up as well at the Sweet 16, the 2013 WSOP 10K. Bonomo finished 3rd, but Marc-Andre was eliminated by Phil Hellmuth in the Sweet 16.
Punished.
Yeah, Phil actually admitted that Mark played better and offered him a case of Dom Perignon, and he did make good on his offer a few years later.
I wonder what a case of Dom is worth. How many bottles are in a case?
You're not asking the right guy. Maybe 12. So that's
they're
worth
worth
a couple.
what, $200 or $300 each, maybe? Does that give him $3,000 rake back?
I mean,
that's great.
It's not bad.
Wow, Igor is just a fighter. He is not afraid. Usually whenever you get caught bluffing, a lot of people are very gun-shy right after that. Some people are the opposite, though. And sure enough, Igor may be the type of player who is the opposite. But yeah, he's getting after it. Interesting small raise size here. Notice that Mark has to call 5,000 to win 18, right? So he really doesn't have to win very often at all to justify calling here. I'm trying to look at... So the stack sizes, I guess Igor has 17K left. It's pretty close to just calling and trying to get there, especially if you think your opponent could have 9-7 or Jack-9 and may give up. weird spot when he makes it so tiny. Of course, he could just have the nuts, right? If Igor just has the nuts, then Mark's drawing stone dead. It's tough to play when your opponent check raises you on any street very often because they're kind of making you play significant pots, and you don't want to play significant pots with queen high. And you're usually going to have queen high or king high or something. So most of the time, they're making you play significant pots with marginal stuff. It's hard to defend. Of course, once your opponents realize you're check raising a ton, they can just start continuation betting with a stronger range, or checking back some of the hands they don't really want to get check raised with, and then that may not work out too well for you if you're getting after it too much. For those who don't know, it's about 120 degrees in this commentary booth. I don't really understand how, because it's a big open room.
It is warm.
It's even hotter in the cube.
If you're just joining us, this is the second game of the second match of the day. That's right, a Sunday doubleheader. Earlier today, Jonathan Little, who's in the booth with me now, defeated Mike Leah of the Paris Aviators 2-1. That's 6 big points, for the Las Vegas Moneymakers. We are dark tomorrow. No matches tomorrow, but we're back on Tuesday, 11 a.m. Pacific time, of course. Sao Paulo versus London. It is Tiago Nishihima, who's played really well heads-up, against a heads-up master in the GPL, Justin Bonomo. Can't miss match.
So here, Igor raised, Mark 3-bet, Igor called, Igor flops the nuts. The effective nuts. It's important to recognize in poker, you never have, or you very rarely have the actual nuts, but this is a hand that you are very happy to get your money in. So most legitimate poker players call this the nuts. So, I mean, something to keep track of. I know in the Twitch chat, they're going to say, he doesn't have the nuts for whatever the nuts is. 7-4 is the nuts, but it's close enough to the nuts.
Jonathan, I call this the hand where I would have 2 pair and the guy would finally get a river straight on me, because that's how good I am.
You think you're not lucky. You have to be confident in your luck.
I'm in the booth with Jonathan Little. I am the luckiest man alive. There's a lot of truth to that, by the way. That is not a troll. That is very true.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here whenever you want me.
You bet.
So are all Mondays dark on the Global Poker League?
No, actually, that'll depend on the week. We do go dark Saturdays on some of the weeks. So.
And are Sundays always double headers, or does that change up too?
That will change depending. We also have a double header, I think, on Friday, so it'll depend on the days. We have to fit basically, third. I don't remember how many matches, but
well, there's six per week,
right? So we have more matches than days or slots available. That's why we're trying to do that. We usually try to do our double headers the days that the WSOP live stream is off,
right? In
order to cater to the audience.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Wow. So Igor is betting big.
Well,
28 into whatever this was, 18. Igor's balancing his all-in walk-off range pretty nice. He did the 4-bet with King 2 offsuit earlier and walked off. He did the all-in with here with a pretty strong hand and walked off. Can't do that in regular poker where you're sitting at a table. Well, yes, you can, and then they look at you like you're crazy.
Right.
It's usually a tell if you go all in and get up and act confident at the poker table. I'm excited to see how tells develop in the Global Poker League. I'm actually doing a webinar tomorrow with this guy named Zach Elwood on poker tells.
Right.
And this is sort of like completely unexplored area on the Global Poker League, because I bet whenever he walks off to the right, it's a bluff. Walks off to the left, it's for the nuts.
Maybe his arm moves differently, and you're right.
And if you can pick up on that kind of thing, that's huge.
Yep.
I mean, I'm for sure going to go study whoever I play next time diligently, whatever they are doing in the cube, and it's hopefully going to give away something. But like Mark, you're not going to pick up much off Mark. Notice he just sits here all the time.
Right.
And I think he's doing a very good job with his timing tells. Igor's a little bit more, or has more motion, more movement, and I don't know if it means anything. It may not, but maybe it does. So maybe Igor can get called by ace high here if he doesn't bet gigantic. So he does go 5,000. This is a bet that could conceivably get called. It's important, maybe not necessarily against great players like Mark, but you always want to ask yourself, how much can my opponent realistically call with ace high, with pocket twos? Whatever range you're trying to get called by. And this is a size that could easily get called by ace high and pocket twos. But, some good players, if you bet 15,000, they might call you because they think you're obviously trying to bluff. So it's Not, it doesn't. It's kind of that theory falls apart against a lot of very good players. But he does get called, right? And maybe he could have gotten called for more. It's tough to say. It's always a good result, though. Are people welcome to come down to watch these matches? I know my wife is in the audience right now.
That's right. She bought her ticket $700 on the secondary market, that ticket, Jonathan.
Wow.
Absolutely. We do have a few seats available. The studio is quite small, and we do appreciate if you do want to come down. Just let us know. Just reach us on Twitter at GPL, and we'll try to fit you in.
It's a fun setup. You can come down here, hang out, see the studio. It's great.
And get to meet the players, which is always a fun thing as well.
You can see Laura doing the interviews.
That's right in front of you.
Everyone in the Twitch chat, come on down.
It's great.
Igor has a pretty rough hand here. It's always interesting to see if players are betting with their 0% equity hands. And, you need to bet in different spots with your 0% equity hands. Sometimes you should be betting with 0% whenever it should be very good for your range. And sometimes you should not be whenever it's good for your opponent's range. Interesting, Igor did not attempt to fire the turn. I probably would have considered it, but whatever, you have nothing. My wife was asking me earlier, like, he has nothing. Why is he betting?
Well, it's Mike Leo. That's why he's betting.
Yeah. Why is he calling you with only king high? Like, I don't know. He likes to gamble. Some people just like to gamble. Heads up is a good gambling game. Especially if you're against another gambler.
That's right.
Not so good if you're against a very good player. Then you want to play Pot Limit Omaha.
Silver Poker on Twitch asking, when do we see Jungle Man in the cube? Jungle Man right now in a Hong Kong cash game, making quads every day. If you saw that picture on Poker News the other day, Jungle Man being very rich in Hong Kong. He's expected in Vegas to play the cash games and the World Series of Poker main event, so we should see him later this series. What we need to do now is build a secondary cube just in case Jungle Man goes wild, which he probably will.
Good luck getting him scheduled. So they're really fighting back and forth in this match so far. Igor is electing to 3-bet some of the weaker hands. Definitely a good strategy. Hands that are not quite good enough to call with. If your opponent's not going to be calling your 3-bets a ton, then you want to be 3-betting your junk, as well as your nut hands to some extent.
To our friends on Twitch, I was obviously joking about the $700 ticket. I would never sell a $700 ticket to Jonathan Little's wife. That would be very cruel of me. Of course, attendance is free here in Las Vegas. Come join us.
If they'd like to pay, though, they can.
Yes, okay. I will take the cash directly and take care of that for them.
Yes. They'll even buy you dinner. You'll buy them dinner if they give the $700 ticket.
Agreed.
If you guys are not subscribed to the Twitch stream,
that's right.
Do it. You can get the fun emoticons.
There's some fun there.
Las Vegas Moneymaker emoticons represent.
The Cube will then travel to San Diego for the GPL playoffs during TwitchCon, which should be a great time. San Diego to most. And then make its way across the pond to beautiful London for the GPL finals. I'm expecting Jonathan Little's Las Vegas Moneymakers to do the comeback.
Oh my gosh, I hope they do. It's going to be so embarrassing if they don't.
That's right.
After the summer series, how does the schedule look? Because it's only heads-up matches during the summer, right?
That's right. And then we go back to our regular schedule of online matches, some 6-max, some heads-up. And the last few weeks are just heads-up matches. And those will be big, Jonathan. That'll be the scramble for the playoffs. And then right after we're done, I believe 7 days after we're done, we're already in San Diego to play the playoffs. And then we take the old NFL 1 month off. They take 2 weeks for the Super Bowl, but we'll take a month off and be back in London at the beautiful SSE Wembley Arena, which will be very exciting.
Are the heads-up matches still worth 3 points at the end?
Correct.
So a team could just be buried.
Yes.
Ooh, that's tough.
Yeah.
You don't want to be buried.
Jonathan Little would like 17 points per heads-up match in the second half.
Well, if you're down, you certainly want to rack up the variance. I mean, for sure.
Oh, for sure.
It's kind of interesting. You'd think they would maybe put some 6-handed at the end because that's ways for the teams to come back.
Yeah.
Whereas if they're down 30 points, they're just dead.
Yeah, the reason we did that is the fact that every team needs to play the same amount of matches against every other club, both in 6 max, obviously, which is normal because you're playing the other teams, but also in heads-up competition. So that's why there's a few more heads-up matches there near the end.
I see.
Maybe we'll mix it up next year and play some heads-up weeks, maybe before the end, in order to have both disciplines still, unique near the end.
They could also, just make like 1 or 2 big games at the end or something where everyone puts in their hard hitters, and then make that a special stream or something. Or make them play 6-handed in the cube or something.
In the cube, yeah.
That would be pretty sweet to have the best players from every team 6-handed in the cube.
That'd be great.
Towards the end.
Doing over there.
Igor electing to 3-bet the pocket 7s, probably to get it all in. Interesting Mark folds a 9-8 suited. That's a great hand.
Listen.
He probably thinks Igor's 3-betting primarily strong hands at this point in order to justify folding the 9-8 suited, because 9-8's great. You guys almost saw me call all in with Jack-10 suited earlier today. And 9-8's almost Jack-10.
Shout out to Anatoly Filatov. He's in the stream watching his horse. Anatoly sitting at the WSOP mentioning that Igor did miss the 1K today in order to play his match. We do appreciate that. And we told the story of Marc-Andre coming down, taking a flight last night, very last minute flight, as Martin Jakobsen is the only Montreal national here so far, Jonathan. And he was going deep day 1B in the Millionaire Maker, so Marc-Andre deciding to hop on the plane, which was the good thing to do because Jakobsen does actually have a lot of chips day 2 of the Millionaire Maker.
Anatoly, what do you think about Igor's performance so far? Let us know in the chat. I'm excited to hear your thoughts on it. I think he's playing great so far. He's certainly fighting.
Yeah.
It's kind of tough for Canadians because whenever they come to the World Series of Poker, the reason a lot of them are not here is because they have pretty brutal American tax laws where if they cash, they get 30% of their money held for 2 years or something. And you can't really play profitable poker if the government's going to hold your money for 2 or 3 years.
That's right. And it does get messy with investors and such as well because of the tax situation. So it's very complicated.
So that's why, if people are wondering why no one from Canada is here, because Martin's not from Canada, he's from
Sweden. Yeah.
Sweden, right. So that's why he is here playing the whole series.
And he lives in London, therefore,
right.
Tax-free haven, London.
Everyone from Europe lives in London or Malta.
That's right. It's true.
But anyway, that's why the Canadians are not here, and that's why Mark had to fly in, especially for this match. So Mark has the nuts. Again, effective nuts. Bet's huge. Igor's probably going to get off the hook on this one, though. Whenever some of the obvious draws come in, and some weird backdoor draws come in, it's usually a fine spot to call. Of course, Mark could just have Queen Jack or King Jack or something. Maybe Igor thinks that's why he's betting so big. But you have no diamond blockers in Igor's hand. Mark is probably good enough to bet somewhat thin here, maybe with a 10. If your opponent starts betting with a 10 or a 9, then you just have to fold the ace-8. If your opponent's only betting with a flush, then a flush or a full house, then calling becomes a lot more realistic. You always got to try to figure out your opponent's range in this spot, and if it's a lot of stuff that you beat and very few hands that beat you, you should be calling, and if it's a lot of hands that beat you and very few hands you beat, then you should be folding. But you got to think about that stuff. A lot of people just look at their hand and say, I have ace high. Is ace high a good hand for a lot of money? And they say no, and they fold. And that's a pretty big error.
Anatoly on Twitch saying he missed Jonathan's question. Jonathan Anatoly is asking, how do you think Igor has fared so far in this match? Let us know.
Yeah, Igor's a fighter. From the six-handed games I saw of him, I didn't really see much just because I had 30 minutes before this game started to do some research. I thought he was just playing kind of good, tight, aggressive, and I was not really expecting such aggression from him. And if I was doing just quick research on him to come in and play, I would have been folding way too often versus him right off the bat. It's important to recognize what your opponents think about you. Because if you know what they think about you, then you can go in and play one way or the other. Although maybe Igor's just crazy. I didn't see all of his matches. Maybe he's absolutely bonkers, which clearly he is.
Right.
Yeah, we got to get the water out of the cube. No water in the cube anymore. That should not be allowed. Make them sweat. Make them be miserable in there. If you're not in pain when you're playing poker, you're not doing it right. Igor... Oh, sorry, put in a min raise. Never mind. Thought he threw it, but he did not. So the stacks are getting pretty short at this point. Blinds are up to 1,000, 2,000, and there's only 100,000 chips in play, so both players playing 25 big blinds.
Yes. Just a little bit.
And they're pretty much even in stacks at the moment, too.
This is right around when you start seeing players developing a limping strategy, 25-ish big blinds and less. Some people do it earlier.
25 bigs.
Some people never do it, of course. So Igor sticking with raising 7-4 offsuit, certainly fine strategy. You want to be limping hands that you don't mind seeing a flop with. And you typically want to be raising hands that don't flop as well. And 7-4 offsuit is a pretty junky hand, so you might as well raise it and try to steal the pot.
And Anatoly letting us know that his star pupil is a little bit spewy, but he's putting the max pressure on Marc-Andre, which is always a good thing.
So here we see Mark limping another hand that's a little bit junky, but acceptable, right? It's not like some people may look at Jack 5 and think it's worse than 7-4, but it's slightly better because it makes top pairs. Notice he limps in and just folds to a raise, no problem.
Well, this last comment by Anatoly is quite intriguing because I know Anatoly is very strict with his players. They're following a plan, but he's actually saying that he did not expect Igor to be this aggressive. So that is fun to see as well. He's when you let him out in the cage or in the cube, that's the point. He is raging on.
He's a cubed Wolverine.
That's right.
Wolverines don't like to be cubed in.
They don't like.
They want to get out with all the points.
Agreed.
And run rabid around Las Vegas.
That's right.
I like how you say both these players' names very quickly together because they're both kind of tongue twisters.
Right.
They just roll right out of your mouth. I was trying to do it earlier before I got in here, and I couldn't say one of the names without getting it wrong.
I spend way too much time doing that in my spare time, Jonathan.
Big ace there.
Ace king of diamonds.
Big ace there.
Sick read. Says big ace of diamond. Big ace. It's scary when your opponent just calls your hand out with almost no action.
That's right. Shy Pre-Rouge saying Chipometer is a good idea. Thank you. I came up with chip meter, and of course Joe Stapleton said you gotta add an O in the middle, and he was right. It's the Chipometer.
Chipometer.
I think he meant chick-o-meter, but
Chipometer.
knowing Joe.
He loves the women, huh?
Well, women love him. That's the thing.
I see.
He makes it look like he's a poor, desperate single man, but no, Joe Stapleton. The ladies love the funny stapes.
Interesting spot where Mark elects to raise a very good hand, which is, of course, fine. And he does get one bet out of Igor. Not much you can do with Queen 7 on that board, though. Although Igor has been fighting earlier, he might as well keep fighting. Nothing wrong with fighting.
If you're wondering where Stapes is, he is in Fargo, North Dakota for the next few days. He will be back for Friday's action. No action tomorrow, but we'll be back Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Don't worry about it.
So here Mark has a reasonable hand. He has to figure out if he should be calling or conceivably shoving. I would probably just call here, but the reason calling is sometimes suspect is because there are a lot of bad turns for his hand, and he could easily just have the best hand at the moment, and when he doesn't, he probably has 25% equity or so. And shoving would not have been too huge. Probably just a little bit too big, though, so I think calling's fine. If he had maybe 15 big blinds to start in the hand, I think shoving would be a little bit better.
I was asked earlier if it's English only inside the cube. Technically, we'd like the players to speak in English, obviously, since that's the bigger demographic. That being said, Jonathan, when that cube door closes, there aren't many rules at that point, so we can't control those players in the cube.
There are no rules.
That's right.
They told me no water in the cube, and as soon as I get in there, Mike Lee is drinking coconut water.
Oh, yes, we do allow coconut water, but no real water.
So Igor again did the bet and walk off. He's done the bet and walk off multiple times. Very balanced. I love it. Maybe it's just anytime he makes a big bet, he walks off.
Right.
Anytime he knows his opponent's going to fold, he walks off. It's pretty sweet.
It's getting dire for Marc-Andre. He needs these 3 points, and Yaroshevsky's just putting the pressure on.
Igor has been significantly more aggressive than Mark, and he's blinding him down. Well, both games he's blinded him down to some extent. I say blinded down really means just sort of, won all the small pots.
Right.
And you know, Mark got lucky to win 2 all-ends in a row in the previous. Actually, he won one, then lost the other one. But you don't want to be the guy who's getting to the short stacked portion as the shortest guy every time, because then you have to win 2 hands, and the other guy has to win 1.
Right.
And that's what happened. You know, Igor got it in quote-unquote bad last time, but he only needed to win 1 of the 2 hands, whereas Mark had to win both to win. This is something that a lot of tighter players in multi-table tournaments do. They play tight, get it all in with the best hand, double up, and then they're 1.5x up from where they started when they were tight. Then they blind off again to the stack they had initially, then they get it all in with 70% again. And eventually, if you get it all in with 70%, you're going to go broke.
If I may critique my placer, that is my major issue.
Well, that's not good. You need to be the one chipping up. You want to be going from like one stack to 1.5 stacks, then getting it all in. And then if you lose, you're back to half a stack, but you're not out. You want to not be out, is what it amounts to.
That's right.
And that's how a lot of the best players do it. That's how you see a lot of the players who are in the Global Poker League succeeding on long-term great results, because they are winning a lot of pots that don't belong to them, and they have to lose twice as many all-ends as the average player who plays kind of tight. This is a pretty long match.
It is very long, yes.
Hand 47. What has been the longest match so far?
Over 100 hands, the third game between Aaron Paul and Fabrice Soulier. Soulier was battling not wanting to be swept by the 3-time Emmy Award winner, of course.
Are they both tight?
Yeah, they were very tight.
Okay.
Yeah, they were very tight, yeah.
I mean, that's the only way it can realistically go long, unless both players just get all in a bunch. I actually had the record for the longest WPT. It was me versus Jonathan Jaffe a long time ago.
Right.
And our heads-up match went until 5 a.m. or something. We got heads up at something like 11 p.m. and played 6 hours. And it was because we started heads up with 150 big blinds each, and then just the short stack won every single all-in. So that happens sometimes, but here in the cube, once you get short, you're down to 20 big blinds, and eventually someone's going to win 2 in a row.
Yep. This is game 2 of 3 here between the Montreal Nationals and Moscow Wolverines. Eric Dany joined by the great Jonathan Little.
Hello, everyone. A lot of boards like this where whoever wants it is winning. Like right here, I'm curious to see if Igor tries to win. It's not a small pot, but notice if he just puts a bet out, he has some chance to win. But he doesn't. Let's Mark check it down with a pretty marginal hand.
By the way, these two players are very solid on tour, of course, but just a little stat comparing this match to the one we just saw. We have 3 total victories by these two players. Again, accomplished players, but compare that to Leah and Jonathan Little. 30 career victories, the two of them together. 115 cashes for these two players combined, and Leah has 155 on his own. So Little and Leah, the duo, really, it just shows how you guys are veterans and you've been around for such a long time, and you've been very successful for all this time.
Well, to be fair, Mark's been very successful online.
Absolutely.
For forever in cash games,
Absolutely.
Which is, if you had to pick me if I'd rather be a high-stakes cash game professional or a live tournament pro, I think I'd sign up for the online cash game professional.
Yeah, agreed.
So he may not have as many victories, but he probably has all the money. And I don't know about Igor, but he has not been around. I mean, he's only been around since 2010 or so, and he has some great results for being around only since then. And I don't even know what his online results are. They're probably great as well. So we've had a bunch of hands where it's one player getting a good hand, the other player getting nothing. One player getting a good hand, the other player getting nothing. And what happened here? So Igor raises, Mark likes to go all in, and Igor's just going to fold. And this is what happens in heads-up poker sometimes, and that's okay. That's part of the game. Jack 4, interesting to see if Mark limps with a 15 big blind stack, or if he decides to raise. He does elect to limp. I'd probably shove this in Igor's shoes. I notice here that a lot of players in Mark's seat would min raise all of their hands, and they would lose an extra big blind whenever Igor shoves. And if you're losing that extra big blind with your junk, and you're losing that every single time with your junk, it's going to cost you a lot of equity in the long run. The logic behind limping is that if you limp and your opponent checks, you are getting 3 or 4 to 1 based on whatever the ante is. Probably 3 to 1 on your limp. So is your hand going to win 25% of the time or something like that? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Everything will. And if your opponent does raise, it's usually with a hand that crushes you anyway, so you can get out of the way. So here Igor limps with a good hand, and I think this is perfectly fine. I'd probably just shove this one, but it's fine to limp as long as you plan on calling a shove. But Mark really does not seem like the player who is jamming a ton over the limp. So for that reason, I think you don't want to let him just check and see a free flop with his 9-4, for example. You'd rather him just fold the 9-4. Interesting bet by Igor. I'd probably just check there, because pretty much no matter what Mark has on ace-king-4, he's not going to have much equity. Like right there, he had 9-5, and the only way you're getting any money out of him is to check. Don't be afraid to play your hands for like small amounts of value if you think your opponent has nothing most of the time. And on ace-king-4, your opponent will have nothing most of the time.
Marc-Andre, a 33-year-old Canadian from Montreal, attended the University of UNC Greensboro on a tennis scholarship, so standing up for him probably won't be an issue.
I'm going to be interested to see if anyone gets tired of standing up.
Right.
Like they're just like, oh my God.
Yeah, we had Chris Moorman mention earlier this week that the legs were getting heavy in the end. That's probably because Scott Ball would not shut up, and that was a beautiful strategy by Ball in that match.
Scott Ball was leaning on him the whole time, too.
Absolutely. The MMA training came into play there.
Yeah. I suggest all poker players, especially if you play online, get a standing desk, because that will be much better for your neck. I pretty much ruined my neck because I played online with poor posture for years, and now I have horrible neck pain. And you do not want that. I now have a standing desk. It is much better, and it's worth whatever the extra price they want you to pay for it. So look into that. It will save you down the road. I've made years and years of mistakes, so listen to this one.
Many players on the GPL playing on stand-up desks, it is not a gimmick. It has nothing to do with being up in the cube. It's actually the way they play. Jakobsen, Kurganov, they prefer to play standing up, and that does make sense. You're right.
Nice fold.
Also, try to have good posture at live poker, too. I recognize you have to sit at live poker, but try to sit up straight. I mean, if you look at people like Tony Gregg, and I mean, he has perfect posture. And I bet his neck doesn't hurt too bad. I would always do this thing as a kid where I would sort of like have my elbow on the table and my hand on my chin, kind of like leaned over. Now I have terrible pain in my neck. So don't do that. Take care of yourself. You only have one body. At least for now, maybe not in the future. So these guys are just trading back and forth. No real significant pots going down. No one doing anything too ridiculous. Igor is electing to raise with his junk. It's like this is a hand where if Mark decided to shove this hand, Igor's going to fold.
Right.
And if you see your opponent min raising a lot, Mark should be shoving this hand because it does well enough when he gets called, and you just steal it a ton. So I would be at least aware that Igor is opening perhaps a little bit too wide. Igor's probably just going to pot control mode this one down. Just check, 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 check. No real reason to bet because if you bet and get called, you're usually not so happy. So should Mark bluff this river? Igor, in my mind, probably has a lot of tens, marginal pairs, and king highs and jack highs. So if he has that, is he going to fold to one bet? I would guess probably not. So Mark kind of has to give up here.
Yeah.
And notice if Mark just shoves pre-flop, he wins the pot and moves on to the next hand. Although that's being results-oriented, but the alternative is he shoves, gets called, and has 38% equity, which is fine.
Some players, Jonathan, are making moves. I think Dominic Nietzsche is one that really discussed that, saying that in some situations he would fold because of the points available, so using the GPL standings to affect his play a bit, making maybe marginal decisions, making a decision based on the points available to them. How do you play it out? Do you just play it out, it's a simple game of heads up and I need to win this or lose this, or do you sometimes make a move that you might not do in a regular heads up match since you're not playing for $100,000, but you are playing for points?
Well, in heads up poker, there are no payout implications typically because you either win or you lose. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure that's how it still works in this because your goal is just maximize equity in this individual match. In six-handed, it becomes very different.
Right.
Because once, like Montreal, for example, they should just be content locking up 2 points in every six-handed game for the rest of the season because they're so far ahead. But heads up, I don't think it matters at all because we're going to have an all-in here.
Yep.
Come on. Just queens.
Just queens.
Just queens.
So Mark's going to get the double, up to 18 or 19 big blinds, and Igor is down to change.
Yeah, I think Mark desperately wanted that double up. We'll have to see if he can close it down now.
Well, this is what happened last time. Mark got a double up, and then he lost.
Right. Right.
This time Igor's going to have to get a double up first. But, I mean, people in the chat, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but there's nothing you can really do in heads up beyond maximizing your equity in each situation. Because you either win or you lose, right? And you can't say I'm going to play tight to try to get not first here. So they're all in again. Standard short stack all in. Both players played it well. Straight draw for Igor, but that's no good. Give it to Mark.
That'll be it.
No embarrassment for either player today. They both have a win.
That's how you like it here. The split.
Tough battle.
Good one, girl.
I've seen a lot of matches last like 10 to 20 hands.
Jonathan, as players, you guys do like these split, so at least you don't get humiliated. The people at home, they want to see blood. They wanted to see Igor Yaroshevsky pick those extra 3 points out. It's always good to see Marc-Andre Ladouceur sweat it out, but 3-3, one match, one game each. Sorry, you just mentioned that both players have just been playing solid poker, and it's been a fun one to watch so far.
Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily solid poker. They're getting out of line. They're trying to steal pots that don't belong to them, and they're fighting for this. I mean, it may look like once they get short, they are playing somewhat straightforwardly, but whenever you do get short, you're supposed to play kind of straightforwardly. Just because getting out of line, if your opponent adjusts to take advantage of it, is so detrimental.
You've been playing so well for your team, but do you think that someone like Ladouceur, who's an accomplished player, the team manager, bottom of the table when it comes to that team scoring, there must be a little added pressure on him to perform well today?
He can probably hear you right now.
Yes.
You're needling the hell out of him.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly feels the pressure to do well, and I feel like he probably thinks he's played perfectly fine throughout the league, so sometimes you just don't get the points. And it's unfortunate when you're the guy who's not putting up the performance, but like you said, he has no live tournament results.
That's right.
What do you expect from the guy?
That's right. That's 118 points now for the Montreal Nationals. Boy, the rich get richer here. A 17-point difference with the LA Sunset. They'll get in the cube later on this week. It's interesting to see, Jonathan, how the teams are separating themselves. That's not necessarily good news for the moneymakers, but it does look like Montreal and LA are separating themselves from the group, so that means there could only be 2 playoff spots available at the moment for the moneymakers.
It's unfortunate for the teams in the bottom of the American Conference, the moneymakers and the Rush, because as points go to the American Conference, they are getting loaded on that side.
Right.
So far, all of the matches, I think, or most of the points have gone to the American Conference.
That's right. The Americas won the first 6 in Heat 1, and then you as well, so 7 in a row.
So we're all putting up quote unquote good results for our teams, but they're proportional results for our teams. So the way San Francisco and Vegas come up is they need the top teams, or any of the teams really, to lose points to the European Conference. So even though the European Conference has been losing to the American teams, they are not actually losing proportional to each other.
Yeah, so for you, Jonathan Little, this this game, you need the Moscow Wolverines to post those points. So, not that you're against Marc-Andre Ladouceur, but I think you'll be flying the Moscow and the Ukrainian flag in this third matchup here.
Let's go Moscow. It's actually kind of tough because Montreal is probably going to get a playoff spot no matter what anyway. So I don't really care what they do because they're going to get it no matter what. Them losing points doesn't actually help the bottom teams, the moneymakers and the Rush, too much. I need to see the Rounders and the Mets losing points.
Yeah, those are 2 big points. You're absolutely correct. Those are 2 teams that you need to chase at the moment. Speaking of chasing, let's chase down Laura Cornelius. That's a pretty good segue there, sir. She is with Marc-Andre and Igor.
I am indeed. Marc-Andre Ladouceur, congratulations. Do you feel a bit more relieved now? You've managed to score 3 points. It's not going to be a sweep.
Yeah, I am relieved. Like Eric was saying, everybody on my team is putting up some points, and I felt the need to participate there at some point. So I didn't want to go into the third match with having a chance of getting swept there.
Everything to play for now. 1-1.
Yep.
Who's taking this last one?
I think I win.
Well, America's conference like 5-0 or 6-0 so far, so we're gonna keep that streak going.
Yeah, very, very confident here on the floor. Could you pick up any tells from each other in there? Were you studying each other?
You more or less. I mean, you can see. I'm looking forward to look at the replay and see what's actually happening when he goes for a little walk there in the corner and comes back and then laughs and then smiles at me for a while.
Because there's no chips to touch. It's all very, very different.
Yeah, well, I'm still trying to find the best way to either to hold it in one hand or two hands.
Yeah.
So hopefully by this third match, we'll know a little more about that.
Okay, well, it is 3 points apiece here. Moscow with 3, and obviously Montreal with 3 too. We're about to find out who will clinch the decider after this quick break.
Can't get enough of the GPL? Head over to globalpokerleague.com for the most complete and up-to-date standings, schedule, stats, and information on your favorite team, as well as full-length match replays, highlights, and epic hands from all of our matches, and much, much more.
Breathe the air just like a fire, we can't control it. See explosions in the sky. Moving faster than the sun over the horizon. Chance it all to feeling high. Body's moving slow. 'Cause this love is all night. Moving faster than the sun. Explosions in the sky.
And we are back here as Marc-Andre Ladouceur was trolling us as we trolled him throughout this match. The boys mentioned something during this interview, Jonathan, that I actually think is very interesting. Want your opinion on it? When you guys are playing your online matches, you do get to see the live stream after a few minutes. In this case, that's not the case. So you don't have you're not able to do any research on the fly. How do you handle those matches? Do you watch the live stream while it's happening? Do you wait until the end? And if you do watch during, what do you pick up out of that?
I've always had like an iPad up on the side, so I'll have my computer here, playing on the computer, and then the iPad on the side, where I'm not really listening to the commentary so much,
Right.
but more so just observing the hands the opponent is playing. And I think everyone is probably doing that. I think it's probably silly not to, but you see sometimes the players are playing on the beach or something like that, and you know
Right.
for a fact they're playing on a small laptop, and they can't really have both the things up, and that's some amount of a disadvantage. But here, I mean, I have a decent amount of experience playing heads up live and heads up online where you don't get to see your opponent's cards.
Right.
So it's not really a new format to me, and you sort of learn to make deductions about what your opponent must be doing. Like if they're 3-betting you a ton, they must be bluffing some. And if they are folding a ton, they must be folding too often. So you have to make logical deductions kind of quickly.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are afraid to do that, especially a lot of amateur players. They want solid information before they
Right.
adjust. And in a fast-paced heads-up match, you don't have that much time.
If I may critique something of Jonathan Little's, your matches have been played in an office, a white background. You mentioned guys like Bousquet and Fedor Holtz who've been playing either at the beach or in Costa Rica in the beautiful pool behind them. When do we see the Jonathan Little vacation shot?
I'm living the dream staying in my office. I actually just designed a new office at my new apartment, and there's not much to it. There's maybe one picture on the wall, some books, and nothing else. I do not like to be distracted. And I mean, you saw me today in the cube where I was just getting flustered anytime I would not know how to work the program. So I try to minimize the distractions.
You mentioned, I believe, in one of the streams that there was renovations happening at your house. How have those been going? The Twitch stream really wants to know.
They're pretty much done.
Oh.
Well, they're almost done. They'll be done by the time I get back from the World Series. So I am happy to get into my new apartment. It's tough playing from a legitimate office.
What do you think is going to happen here in this third match, Jonathan? We've seen two players that have played fairly even, and Igor maybe a bit more aggressive so far. Do you expect a little of the same from the Wolverine?
I imagine Mark is going to keep playing his somewhat just solid
Right.
game that is really difficult to take advantage of, and I think Igor might get after a little bit. He did not seem to enjoy losing that last game, and so he may be in the fighting mood. Although, at the same time, maybe he went into the cube thinking, I'm going to try to run the opponent over and get a game,
Right.
and once I get a game, I'm happy enough. And maybe that's his thought process. Now he's just going to try to not do anything ridiculous.
You spent over an hour in the cube earlier today. When it comes to that third match, tell me how you feel in there. You're getting even more sweaty, more sticky, and there's a lot more pressure on you. And how is that feeling on the third match?
I don't mind the sweat.
Good.
I love it and I live in it. I am ready to crush my opponent. That was my entire goal, and
you did.
Luckily I did. It's worth mentioning, Laura asked before our third match who's going to win. I spoke up, said I'm winning.
You did.
Here, Igor spoke up and said he was winning.
Now, to be fair, both Canadians were being very polite and did not say anything, Jonathan.
If they want to give the points, they are welcome to give the points.
All right, I think we're about ready to go in there. It is, by the way, 8-0 the Americas Conference could be after this matchup, so a lot of pressure on Marc-Andre to keep the streak alive. Let's get to the cube.
We're back on. All right.
Are poker players from Europe bad? Because they're 0 for 8, you know?
Oh.
0 for 7. Maybe Europeans are just bad at poker.
There's a mix, right? Martin Jakobsen, you know, he plays for Montreal. Nanonoko plays for an Asian team, so there's a lot of mix.
Okay.
But on paper, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the Eurasian Conference has not been to par.
Interesting here, on the first hand, I assume Mark raised, Igor checks. Comes King XX, Mark checks behind, not going for value. This is a spot where you can easily get called by ace highs. And Mark's just checking it down. What is happening? He is trying to get Igor to put in one bet with some marginal hand, or try to get him to call one bet with ace high. But I think Igor would probably call that bet with ace high on the turn. So really he's just trying to get Igor to bluff off. That's kind of an interesting adjustment right off the bat. And Igor, well, he doesn't really have a bluffing hand, so he didn't bite at it. Does Igor pay on the river? I mean, I'd probably pay on the river. And it looks like he does call, I think. Yeah, he does call. And that's fine, you know, whatever. So like right there, Igor lost the pot, but it was 4 big blinds.
Right.
If you lose 4 big blinds with ace high, heads up, that's
this early.
Fine. It's acceptable. People may not know this, but Eric is doing a ton of work on the side back here. Everyone's wondering why I'm doing all the talking. Eric is grinding the internet. I don't know what he's doing.
I'm live updating these standings so that people can
That's a lot of work. I have my own website, jonathanlowpoker.com, and I spend 30 minutes on it per day, and it's a lot of work. You've been on your computer the whole time, grinding that, commentating. You guys are very, very talented.
We have fun.
You just do it all.
Yes.
When are we going to see you in the cube? Next season, are you getting drafted by someone?
Laura and I are going to do some sort of exhibition in the cube. The loser has to shave his or her head. I really hope I win.
Wow.
Yep.
You have a good head or a bad head?
I've got a bad head, but a good head of hair. So there's a lot of pressure on me, you know?
Wow. Good luck with that one.
Thank you.
I don't even know what my head looks like. I never had my head shaved.
I have. It's not the prettiest thing on earth.
So notice here that Mark gets off the hook very cheaply with ace high. So I'm more of a school of that type of poker where you're trying to get out somewhat early if it's obvious the hand's not going to play out so well for you. Like right there, ace high could easily be best, but if you face any additional bets, you're unhappy. And if your opponent's anywhere near aggressive, you're going to face that bet.
Yep.
Or at least you can predict that you're going to face that bet. And notice in that spot, even if he caught an ace, he would have lost. So it's a spot where he liked to get off the hook very cheaply. However, if you fold too often, then your opponent can just run you over. You certainly don't want to get run over.
Jonathan, as an accomplished author, do we have a book coming out soon? Is there anything in the plans?
The book I would like to promote next is Mike Sexton's book.
I'm glad you talked about
Mike
that.
Sexton has a biography coming out, and he is perhaps the best ambassador for poker ever. And I've read most of his book. I haven't gotten all the way through it yet. It's published by the same publisher who has published most of my books, and I got a preview copy, and I've just enjoyed every second of reading it. It is the history of Mike Sexton and also a lot of the history of poker.
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled to check it out. It's called Life's a Gamble. He'll actually be doing a book signing, I want to say next week or the week after
Wednesday.
that. Oh, well, there you go.
Wednesday, yeah.
So Wednesday at the World Series of Poker, we have a booth there. D&B Publishing and Jonathan Low Poker has a booth at the World Series. You can get my books there. And Life's a Gamble should be available then, so check it out.
Those who are watching on Poker Central, the Pokerography featuring Mike Sexton was my favorite so far. Great job there. Mike really takes you through his life, and that could be a precursor to the book where I'm sure there's going to be some juicy stories. It's a little rough times for Mike Sexton. He was a wild one for a while, so really good stuff there. And you're right, one of the best ambassadors. Mike received the Lifetime Achievement Award at the American Poker Awards this February. And it was chills for me when Mike was on the stand, giving his acceptance speech.
It was well deserved. It actually made me cry.
Yeah, he's the best.
I mean, I love Mike Sexton. He's a great guy.
Agreed.
It's one of the funny things he says throughout his book is something to the effect of, I was in between bankrolls, which means
That's great.
I was broke at the moment. So here we have top pair versus bottom pair. It seems like a lot of people are not overplaying bottom pair so much in the Global Poker League, which is good to see. I mean, that used to be something you'd see in high-stakes heads-up games all the time. If you got a pair, you did not fold. I actually used to play $1,000 and $2,000 buy-in heads-up games 6 or 8 years ago on PokerStars, and the games were incredibly aggressive, like ridiculously aggressive. It was not uncommon to get it all in for 100 big blinds, maybe once every 5 games, where you just get anything, you're all in. And that's not what we are doing in today's game. And probably a lot of those players stopped playing the games because people like Olivier Bousquet showed up and played a little bit of pot control and just really strong poker. And you can't just be mindlessly blasting your stack in with anything. But I mean, if your opponent's mindlessly blasting in and you have a pair's pretty great. One other book I have at the moment, it is my best-selling book by far. It's called Excelling at No Limit Hold'em. We're doing a bunch of free webinars in promotion of that, where the authors are getting online and telling you their secrets. I do that on Twitch once a month. You can sign up for those at hold'embook.com. We have a lot of Global Poker League people who are part of the league, also authors of the book, and I'm really excited to be part of it and have the opportunity to bring it to people. Here, Igor is turning his hand into a bluff. It's not going to work, I don't think. No. Actually, so Mike Sexton contributed to Excelling at No Limit Hold'em and had some of his stories in there, and D&B Publishing liked it so much they wanted a whole book of them. So that's sort of how it came about.
Great.
It's good to find poker players who want to work with other poker players to help out everyone else. And I'm glad I found a core group of people who are excited to give back. I mean, like Liv Borey is an author in the book, and she is more than happy to help anyone, and I'm happy to have people like that involved.
My friend Chad Holloway.
Chad Holloway also.
In that book, yeah.
It was a big project. I actually told my wife about 2.5 years ago that I'm going to come to the World Series, get the authors. They're going to write me their chapter in about a month and get it back to me. And the book's going to be done. It's going to take me a month. She said, no way. A year and a half later, I finally chased down Olivier Bousquet and got him to write his chapter, and now it finally got done. But it's a big book. A lot of knowledge. I actually studied Olivier Bousquet's chapter. His chapter is on Heads Up No Limit Hold'em,
right,
which is kind of ideal for this format. And I am very confident that I would not be doing nearly as well as I'm doing if I did not study that chapter. There's also a bonus chapter you can get online by Hyper Heads Up Sit and Go Pro, full of charts and graphs and discussing what to do in various spots. Awesome. I was studying those charts before my game today, and because whenever I'm playing online, I just have them up on the side. Right. But here I had to have them memorized. And I think I pretty much got them memorized. And like limping ace-10 offsuit with a short stack I did today, and that was something I would not have done in the past. But a good pro told me it was good, so I did it. And Mike Leah fell right in the trap with the 9-6, and I got him. So there's a ton of edge to be had in Heads Up No Limit Hold'em, and if you can find players who already know how to easily get that edge and study from them, you can at least be competent pretty quickly. Here I have another just call from Ace X. Igor's 3-betting this hand a little bit earlier, and we see Mark only calling with it. Then again, if you look at the stacks, Igor is blinding him down again. 80 big blinds to 40 big blinds. It's tough when you're on the ropes right off the bat every time. It's actually not so bad whenever the stacks get very shallow because, just one hand and you're back in there, but whenever you're playing 40 big blinds deep, it's hard to win 40 big blinds off of someone. Especially if they're not crazy. Igor may be crazy, though. He does keep betting on the turn. Interesting bet with the king high. He's clearly trying to get Mark to fold a jack or a 3. Maybe he thinks Mark is 3-betting most of his aces pre-flop. If you think your opponent's 3-betting most of your aces, then they should have mostly jacks and draws here. But a lot of the draws that Mark should have would be king, queen, king 10, and queen 10. And those all improve to middle pair, and middle pair's not going to fold. Quick give up from Igor. That's the spot where if Mark does happen to have a jack, well, at least if he happens to have a 3 or an ace, he's never folding. So whenever that card pairs, it's not the greatest bluffing spot.
Anatoly Filatov mentioning that he just busted the 1K, so he needs Igor to win here to turn the day around.
I actually watched Scott Ball's match the other day from the 1500 6 max.
Nice.
Everyone's wondering, what are you doing? Why are you not paying attention to your six-handed game? Had to sweat Scott Ball. Flush draw for Igor. So here again, notice that I think Mark did not bet the flop. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe he did. I'm confused. Sorry about that. So maybe he did continuation bet the flop. Igor probably called, and now he's facing a bet. Yeah, we got to really study the tape on these tells here for live cube tells. Igor does elect to call. Looks like he's going to not lose much more on the river unless he decides to get really fancy. He could try to represent the flush. I mean, the flush or the eight's a reasonable spot to go for it. It's important to not be results-oriented in this spot because Mark should not have very many eights or flushes. But clearly he just has it all. Sometimes you have it all. Pretty muscles, good posture, all the money, and a full house.
Yeah, he's living life right.
Did you get there?
And then he's going to try to get him.
Very nice. I like this.
Fairly clean tell, I think. Whenever it's on your opponent, they're asking you, did you get there or something like that, and then they still bet. Yeah, you don't want to mess around with that.
I love the Igor smile. That smirk is my favorite so far.
This is why I have such a hard time with live tells, because it feels like if you do anything, that's
smile.
if you're quiet. I mean, like if you're generally quiet, like Mark is, and he says anything, why would he possibly do that unless he had a good hand? But it's true. I mean, here we see him do it with the nuts, right? Just because it's so hard to do it as a bluff. I can't put a sentence together when I'm bluffing. So I think the only way you can get away with talking is if you're talking a lot. Although, of course, you could just put the towel on its head and put out that one good sentence. Have that one good sentence rehearsed really well, put it out at the right moment, run your bluff. One suggestion for Global Poker League is we need to make it where it's obvious what team people are on.
Yes.
You see how it says like Nationals behind Mark's head over there on the side of the screen? You can't really see it.
That is also being worked on, and that fix should be in very shortly, yes.
All right,
some
good.
pretty big logos. What we were doing, Jonathan, one of the things is that we were trying to see what landscape we have around the players with our camera angles and such. We wanted to give us a week to figure that out, but yes, some logos coming very soon.
Perfect. You could even just move the chipometer and the flop up a little bit, put those big graphics below it, put the images a little bit bigger on either side.
Yep.
Whatever, I'm sure you guys know what you're doing.
No, but we love it. We love it. And in fact, if you're on Twitch right now, if you go to globalpokerleague.com, you can give us your suggestions there. We're always open to reading everything, and don't think that we don't read everything, because we do. We have reports and analyses that are reported to us every day.
There's a comment box there. You can type in whatever you want to type.
Yep.
I believe you're capped at some number of characters, so don't write an essay. But if you have 6 or 8 good sentences, go there and give the feedback. I mean, Global Poker League is clearly trying to innovate and better poker. And we need your help to do that. Igor acting a little bit funny here. He may elect to shove. I do not think this would be a good shove. A lot of people look at top pair and a draw and think it's a great hand. But notice here, if he shoves and gets called, he's going to be behind. King, queen, king, nine, ace, king, maybe king, jack. So this is a spot where you actually do just want to call. Unless you think your opponent's going to call off with ace, queen or something like that, which, I mean, there aren't very many combos of ace, queen.
Oh, wow.
Well, he's sure not going to fold.
It's a great camera shot there.
Say, please don't fold. Do not fold a pair and a flush, top pair and a flush draw heads up. Like now on the river, he may still end up paying off a bet, but he's not getting stacked, right? Of course, he is going to get there sometimes and not get paid. Like say it's an 8 of spades on the river, it's going to go check a lot of the time. But you're willing to give that up in exchange for not getting stacked. So stacks are 36K. How much should Mark bet? He probably should value bet. It's kind of a thin value bet, but probably acceptable. Since you're trying to get called by marginal stuff, you probably don't want to go too big. maybe like 9,000 if you are going to bet, but it says Mark just checks, so he likes to take the passive line there, which is fine. I mean, like I said, if it was going to be a bet, it was going to be a somewhat thin bet. And it's fine to not value bet in thin spots to some extent. A lot of people think top pair there is the nuts, but it's not really the nuts if you put all of your money in. Like right there, if he goes all in and gets called, he's often beat. But I think if you bet small, you can probably get called. And for all we know, maybe Igor would check shove as a bluff. You want to be more inclined to go for thin value versus people who are going to play straightforwardly. And that may not be Igor. If your opponent's going to be check shoving you a lot and you don't really know how to respond to the check shove, then checking behind's much better. Mark just has ace-king every hand. Full houses and ace-king for Mark. Igor has nothing, but he's hanging around. I like seeing the people in the chat box typing in their bet predictions. That is good. You can type in your prediction, see what the analyst says, see what the pro does. That is exactly how you get better. I mean, I always suggest people who are watching my training videos to pause a ton. Like anytime we get to a decision, before I say what I'm going to do, before I make the action, stop and think about what you would do. Write it down. Make yourself accountable. And if you're getting all of the answers wrong, then maybe you're not doing something right. And if you're getting them all right, that's fantastic. That's exactly what you want to see. I actually made this site, pokercoaching.com, where it's a bunch of quizzes. And you can go through and quiz yourself, and I give my analysis on all these spots. And I force you to do that. Before you can see my action, my analysis, I give you 4 options. And you have to click which one it is, and it'll give you a score, basically. And show you how you do on the flop to turn the river. And you can see if you're making a lot of errors on the turn, for example. And that's, I think it's a very good learning tool for people who are serious about getting good at poker. But you got to test yourself. And you have to make it, like if you just sit here and passively observe poker, you'll get better slowly but surely. But if you're really engaging with it and working hard, you will see yourself getting better. Of course, everyone's not watching poker to try to get better.
Right.
A lot of poker want to sit back, have a beer, and watch some people gamble.
Have some fun, yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that at all. A lot of the most popular streamers on Twitch, they just are throwing a party. Nothing wrong with a party.
They're fun parties too.
Find the people who you like watching and follow them. So here again we see Igor really getting after it. He is raising the flop with nothing. I believe this must have been a 3-bet pot. This is why I can't talk whenever I'm playing poker, because I have no clue what happens. But it looks, just based on the stack size, that maybe Igor raised, Mark 3-bet, Igor calls, Igor bets flop. I'm sorry, Mark bets flop, Igor raises. This is a pretty sick raise. He's not really representing anything besides just the nuts. Mark is going to call at least with his flush draw. He elects to re-raise it. That is weird.
And a fold.
I mean, Mark is clearly going with his hand once he re-raises. That's a cool spot. So there's merit in making a small re-raise if you think it looks stronger than an all-in. Because if your opponent thinks perhaps an all-in is only top pair or a draw, they may be inclined to call kind of wide, but maybe if they think your small re-raises are strong draws or the nuts, they may make a hero fold. Because, I mean, like right there, whenever Mark re-raises, he's not folding at that point, so he doesn't really care which size he picks. He wants to pick the size that's going to make his opponent maybe level himself into folding top pair marginal kicker or something. So Igor down to 20 big blinds now.
Yeah, Mark has really taken control of this one in the last few hands.
I really like how the chip-o-meter says how many big blinds each player has. I would suggest they do that for the players in the cube, because in the cube they don't say how many big blinds the players have. Although maybe that's part of poker. You got to be able to figure that out. Here we have limped pot. We see Igor limping the King X. Mark taking a stab on the river, as he probably should. On boards like this is where you should be taking a stab, where your opponent probably doesn't have so much, and you could easily have something. It's a little bit different on high card boards, where your opponent probably has some marginal pair. I think the blind should be visible on the screen as well, because if you miss the pre-flop raise, you can look at the blinds and just quickly figure out what the pot
Figure it
is.
out. You're right.
Just as a general thing. Like that happens in online poker a lot when I'm 20 tabling, and a table pops up and you see some action. You have to quickly figure out what happened here. If the pot is 4 big blinds, you know that there's a raise and a call.
Right.
If the pot's 8 big blinds, you know there's a raise, a 3-bet, and a call. Anyway, blinds are 1,200. Thank you to the producers for showing us that. So now we see Mark firing away. Igor has a great draw. And 14 big blinds must be about 16,000 chips. So I imagine he's going to be all in. This is a spot where if you call, he's probably not going to get paid if he hits unless he shoves the river, and that's usually a very strong action. So you're not going to realize very many implied odds, meaning if you call, you're only winning this pot here because your opponent's going to check behind on a lot of clubs and a lot of maybe not necessarily a 5. So this is actually a draw that does have some implied odds. But if you shove here and your opponent folds, you win the pot immediately, which is fantastic. And even if you do get called, you have a reasonable draw. No showdown value draws are usually best off played aggressively. You can just see Igor's iPad. He had almost no chips in his stack. That's not where you want to be.
That's right.
Is he going to fold this? Don't fold it. You got to shove. There he goes. All right. So it is all in for 19. So notice that he will have some fold equity versus Mark, because Mark bets 6. He's going to be going all in for 13 more. It's a reasonably sized raise. If Mark bet something like 6 and only had to call 7 or 8 more, you'd expect Mark to call the shove way more often. But here, Igor will have some fold equity. He's playing around with it.
He is.
Deja vu right there. He's going to go a little bit less than all in. Wow.
He folds after a minute and a half in the tank.
I cannot believe that.
But couldn't do it.
I would be all in for sure every time in that spot. At least, I mean, I think calling is probably not the worst because he's probably getting 3 to 1 to call. Oh, someone in the Twitch chat can figure that out, but he's probably getting nearly the right price to call, assuming he thinks all of his draws are live. That's a tight one. If you told me a Russian was going to fold a a flush draw and a gut shot, I would tell you no way. I think we misread his hand or something. Not buying it. So, Igor's down to a short stack. Suited-ish, connected-ish cards like this, well, suited and connected-ish cards like this are great hands to shove. Because if you raise and get shoved on, you have to fold them. And they always have a pretty good amount of equity. You could also limp, but you also don't really limp fold pretty good suited connectors, and that's a hand that's right in that range. It's probably sick live tells in this, too, where if your opponent's looking at you when it's on you, short stacked, maybe he's more inclined to call.
Right.
Don't necessarily know if that's true or not. So Igor does go all in with the ace, which is perfectly fine. This is a hand that's fine to limp in Igor's shoes, because if you limp and you get raised, it's fine to fold, because you often are in bad shape. Whereas the Jack 8 suited, it's much closer to break even if you raise and get shoved on. Interesting, Mark picks a small raise size, even with 14 big blind stacks. I think that's actually a good strategy. I don't have a lot of experience doing that, but you want to have a bluffing range there, too. Right. So you could raise stuff like 6-4 offsuit and Jack 2 offsuit, stuff like that if you feel like it. Hands that are just kind of trashy when your opponent limps. Because if they're limp folding, that's just great. And then you can also raise your nut hands very kind of small, like 2.7 big blinds or so. I need to practice with that. There's always more to learn.
Of course.
So Igor has it all here. Small pots. Notice here Mark gets to see the flop cheaply. And then he just quickly gets off the hook. And that's okay. Do not be opposed to losing pots. I think people who come from live poker really don't like losing pots because it hurts when the dealer takes your money and gives it to someone else.
Absolutely.
Especially when it's a lot of money. But it's part of poker, especially part of heads-up poker. You are going to lose some hands, and that's okay.
This is the third and final game of the day. We had a doubleheader Sunday earlier today. Jonathan Little of the Las Vegas Moneymakers with a 2-1 win on Mike Leah of the Paris Aviators. And Jonathan won his seat here at the booth. Congratulations, sir, on that big win earlier today.
Thank you.
Just joking, of course. We had Jonathan booked a few days ago. We have a dark day tomorrow. No matches tomorrow, but we're back on Tuesday at 11 o'clock Pacific. Boy, this is a fun one. Sao Paulo versus London. Thiago Nishihima and Justin Bonomo, both running very well in heads-up competition so far in the GPL.
I don't know Thiago, but I do know Justin Bonomo, and I love watching him play poker. He is a great player and a genius.
Yes.
I always love watching the geniuses, because I'm just merely smart. When you can study the geniuses, it's a good thing for you. Interesting here, Igor doesn't really lose much money. Or wait, what? Whoever lost there didn't lose much money with middle pair, which is always a good result. Of course, the ace came on the river, which may have saved them. 7-2 offsuit's a nice folding hand. 10-3 offsuit's also a nice folding hand. So a lot of junky hands at this point. This is kind of what happened in the last match, where a lot of players just had junk for a while. Like right here, Mark's probably just going to fold. If we had a live dealer here, the dealer would be getting very tired.
Yes, that's right.
So we could see an all-in here, and this is what we are going to see. Igor's all-in, gets it in bad. But a standard shove. Like whenever you get it all in the spot and win or lose, you can't really be too happy or unhappy, because Igor certainly did nothing wrong here.
I'll do it.
It looks like they are going to give it to Mark. They do give it to Mark with a straight.
Cheers. Well played.
Well-played match by both players, I think. They both were fighting for pots, getting out of line at specific times or certain times, and
Here for like almost 2 hours.
they played well.
Great. Little slow start in this match for Marc-Andre Ladouceur, but he certainly turned things around there. Boy, wouldn't you know it? 8-0 is your conference now. 8 straight wins by the Americas Conference over the Eurasian Conference. Congratulations on that, Jonathan.
Thank you. I played great in all of them.
That's right. You had a lot to do with that earlier today with your win on Mike Leah. Boy, it just I keep on mentioning the rich get richer. 20-point lead for the Montreal Nationals on second place. Marc-Andre flying down here late last night in order to play this match, and he's going to leave Las Vegas with 6 extra points. We mentioned earlier, Jonathan, that you need the other conference to gain some points here. However, you're right in saying, that's right, you're right in saying that with Montreal, it might be a lost cause. You're probably not going to reach Montreal levels this year, so maybe concentrate on the 2 teams ahead of you in the standings and start small. Start with those, right?
Yeah, the teams that Las Vegas and San Francisco will be able to overtake are the Rounders and the Mets, so we need them to do poorly.
Right.
And that's what matters most for the teams at the bottom of both divisions. You need the middle teams to do poorly, and it doesn't really matter what the good teams do. And in reality, I mean, whenever we get back to the regular games, we want Montreal and LA Sunset winning the games versus
Absolutely.
the middle teams,
Yep.
which would be ideal, because then they're getting the points and taking them away from the teams that are in third and fourth place.
So that means you'll be tuning in on Tuesday and Wednesday, heavily cheering for the other conference to get things done then.
Absolutely.
Before we come back and to say goodbye, let's get to Laura. She's got the 2 competitors with her. See how Marc-Andre and Igor are feeling after this nice match. Laura.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Eric. Marc-Andre wins the match 2 games to 1, 6 points. Good job.
Yeah, big comeback had to make there. Tough match. Igor was a really good, accomplished player. Finally had some good run of cards there at the end, so that was good enough for the win.
We always talk about winning the first match and how important it is for the momentum, but you managed to turn that one around.
Yeah, well, the second match was probably a turning point where it lasted like 60-something hands, and it felt like forever, anyways. Yeah, once I had that one, the pressure off the shoulder, the third match was a little quicker and went well. So.
Now, your manager has bust from the WSOP event. He said he really needed you to win this.
I didn't try, but Mark play is so good. It's tough, very tough.
At least you got 3 points. Better
We
than
take
nothing.
it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I hope Natalie's not too hard on him.
Yeah. Does he get cross? Does he?
He gets really mad,
Does he smack
really
your
mean.
hand?
Might get the
No.
whip.
He has to be probably the nicest manager,
Oh,
apart from
wow,
Marc-Andre.
I'm pretty nice.
In the Eurasian Conference is what I meant. Talking about managing your team, who do you think in your team would fare the best in the cube? Who handles the pressure the best?
Well, if we just look at heads-up skills, Pascal Lefrançois is probably among the top guys in the league right now. We approach this being there's a lot of six-max competition, but a lot of points reside in the heads-up matches. So I can say that all my teammates are pretty good to decent heads-up. Jason Lavallee has done a lot of work heads-up also. Martin came here last week and just
they're all very good, aren't they?
went for another sweep. Hoping to see Timex. I don't think Timex and Xuan have played heads up yet.
I would love to see
we'll be able
Timex
to
here.
see them at some point in there. Yeah.
And talking of points for the Montreal Nationals, I believe you now have 121 points, doing so well. And of course, the Moscow Wolverines are doing pretty well as well, just in second place behind the London Royals. Let's go back to the desk and find out where these guys lie in the standings.
The mighty Nationals now 45 points clear on the playoff spot. The rich get richer, Jonathan. And boy, Marc-Andre Ladouceur talking about the rest of his team coming up here with Timex and Xuan Liu probably next in the cube. So it's going to get even more scary here for the teams in your conference.
Yeah, we're in bad shape. Montreal's going to make the finals unless they really mess up something.
Right. Well, let's take a look at the standings to take a look at this damage or the damage control. 20-point lead the Montreal Nationals have on the LA Sunset. Of course, they're one of the two teams to have played 26 matches so far, so LA comes up later this week. So still time for them to pick up some points in Heat 2. The New York Rounders, here's where the nitty-gritty here, Jonathan. New York Rounders sitting at 93 points. Jason Wheeler in the cube later this week against Nanonoko. The Sao Paulo Mets are next. We talked about the match on Tuesday. Critical match for the Sao Paulo Mets. And then, of course, Las Vegas and San Francisco. You were able to get the team out of the basement. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
You mentioned earlier it's baby steps, right? You have to start 3 points at a time, and you got 6 out of 9 earlier today.
All you can get is 3 in each match, and you just got to take the most. I got to take all the opportunities that come to you, and there aren't a ton.
Let's take you to the Eurasia Conference standings, where, according to Laura, there are no nice managers except for Anatoly Filatov. That's too bad for Liv Boré and company. Liv's team, though, doing so well, and Liv did mention that she does whip the team when they're not doing well. So they're doing fairly well, 100 points so far after 25 matches played. There are the Wolverines at 98 points. They were able to collect 3 points. That's good on them. The Paris Aviators, the Hong Kong Stars, are part of that 3 and 4 team. But there's there's not much separation between 1 and 4 in this conference, so the bottom teams are actually in even worse shape than they are in your conference. So that's interesting.
Well, it's also interesting here that Montreal to San Francisco, there's something like a 50-point difference in America, whereas there was only 35-point difference.
That's right.
So the bottom teams, it looks like they're doing bad, and they are doing bad in proportion to the 3rd and 4th teams, a little bit worse than the American. It's happening in the American Conference, but at the same time, they are all a little bit tighter packed in general, just because it's only a 35-point jump, but it's like a 25-point jump between 4th and 5th. So, the bottom teams there are in pretty rough shape at this point.
Yeah, where Montreal has really grabbed the lead in the Americas Conference. In the Eurasia Conference, we've seen Paris on top. We've seen London on top. They are now. We've seen Moscow as well. We've seen Hong Kong actually start well. So, a lot of interchangeable parts, over there. We will be done soon, but before we leave, we are done. We are dark tomorrow. No matches tomorrow, but on Tuesday. It's a big match. It's a critical match here, and I think this guy's going to be watching because he'll need Thiago Nishihima and the Sao Paulo Mets to lose to London Royal Justin Bonomo. I think, Jonathan, if you'd have to pick 1 or 2 players to play in order to help the moneymakers, Justin Bonomo is probably one of the 2, 3, 4 players that you would select to help out here.
Let's try to get Justin in a Las Vegas Moneymaker shirt tomorrow because he is representing our team.
Yeah, absolutely. Those points will be critical. Thiago is going to need those points. I mentioned earlier that Thiago got swept by Pascal Lefrançois, but since he's been playing so well, has not lost one since. Justin Bonomo, the same thing, has not lost in heads-up. Both players really coming into this heads-up matchup on fire. We will see you then. It's on Tuesday. Tomorrow, take a day off. Watch your WSOP live stream. Follow this guy at the WSOP in the next few days. And for Jonathan Little, that's him. For Laura Cornelius, who joined us earlier today, I'm Eric Danis. We will see you on Tuesday.
Can't get enough of the GPL? Head over to globalpokerleague.com for the most complete and up-to-date standings, schedule, stats, and information on your favorite team, as well as full-length match replays, highlights, and epic hands from all of our matches, and much, much more.
Breathe the air just like a fire, we can't control it. See explosions in the sky. Moving faster than the sun over horizon. Chance it all to feeling high.
Body's moving slow.